District Board of Trustees to order at 6 o'clock and do a roll call. Trustee Nelson.
Greg Colodamato.
Ellen Wheeler.
Bill Lambert.
Jose Gutierrez.
Let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present, including our international member, Greg Coladonato. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, it's been moved by Trustee Lambert, seconded by Trustee Nelson, that we approve the agenda. Any discussion? All right. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Are you in that kind of a time delay, Greg?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, I think you're a couple of seconds time delay. So if there's a vote later on, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand because it's hard to figure out what you do. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 2, opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Seeing no members of the public in attendance, I'll adjourn at 6:02. We ready? I'm going to reconvene this meeting of the Mountain View Westman School District Board of Trustees at 6:37 PM and ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Greg, you too.
Yeah, I can't rise without you lifting me up.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to closed session report, and I'll report that no action was taken in closed session. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, consent agenda. The following items will be handled with one action. However, any item may be removed from consideration by individual board members or the superintendent. Is anyone going to remove an item? Can I have a motion to approve?
For what? Wait, what are we?
We're on consent.
Did we do the, okay, close session. Yeah, I wanted to pull 5G and 5J, only contract number 1.
All right. So would you like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items G and J item, the contract 1?
Yes. I move to accept all items on the consent agenda and pull item G, the resolution, and item J, the contract number 1 only, and approve all the rest.
I second the motion.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Ms. Loga, in the first minutes that are in the packet, the March 12th meetings, the meeting is called to order at 9:35 PM instead of AM. So that's one small correction. Yeah. But other than that, everything else is fine.
So Ms. Loga, did you hear that comment? Okay, so is that acceptable to you? Yes. Okay, so it's been moved, right, trustee Nelson, seconded by trustee Lambert, that we approve the consent agenda minus items G and J, contract number 1. All in favor say aye. Aye. Greg?
What's your vote?
Oh, waiting for me? Yeah, aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and I'm going to make a note to myself to move consent. All right. So, time for item 6, communications, employee organizations. Is there anyone from an employee organization wishing to address the board tonight? Seeing none, I'll move on to district committees. Anyone wanting to report on the district committee?
I would.
Yes, trustee Lambert?
Sure. I'm the board representative for CHAC, and hopefully everybody knows, but just in
Yeah.
case, Naomi Matsumoto, the executive director of CHAC, resigned. When was it? About 10 days ago now. And the CHAC board is in the process of deciding how to move forward, options of hiring an interim superintendent, I was saying that, but an interim executive director, and then putting a plan in place for hiring a full-time director.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us know that. Any other reports? Okay, move on to item C, superintendent.
Just wanted to update you on the strategic plan process. I know we'll be talking about a little bit later, but we had 2 great sessions. Yesterday we had and today, so 3. We had a smaller group of individuals. We winnowed it down to about 25. So we had students, parents, community members, as well as business partners who attended. And we started working on some of the drafts as well as some of the strategies. And then we followed up again with that today with our leadership team. So principals, coordinators, assistant superintendents, members of the cabinet, and also working on strategy. So it looks like we are on track to bring hopefully a final draft by June 2nd. And I'll be sharing once we have, we're going back into the table and we're going to do some draftings. But once we have that, I'll start sharing that as it comes out over the next couple of meetings. But I just wanted to let you know sort of where we were in the process, and that, I'm grateful both to the leadership team, the parents, the community members who took, especially yesterday, who went from essentially 8 till about 4 o'clock, working on just different aspects of the strategic plan. It was a real good session. And then we followed up with a lot of some business partners showed up yesterday. We had a conflict with the open house, so we didn't get as big of an attendance. We have another meeting coming up on the 26th where we're going to continue to do some work. And again, all that's going to get us to meet our target deadline, which is before we walk out the door with a strategic plan.
Thank you. Any other report? All right, we're going to move on to item 8, community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone wishing to address the board on an item not on the agenda? All right, we're swimming along. We will move on to item 8, review and action. Item A, Dr. Clark, is this your item?
Good evening. I have for you tonight. We have tonight the resolution 1585.4/16. It's the developer fee rates increase. Every 2 years, the state allocation board meets in January to assess the current developer fee rates in the state and increase them. Once they take their action in January, of course, they were delayed this year a little bit till February. There was an error in their work, and so they had to come back in February, make a change, which actually benefits the entire state because the rates increased again. But the board has to take action to accept those rates and then also adopt a resolution so we can levy those new rates inside Mountain View. And just so you know, some of these rates don't look like they match because on the cover sheet, it talks about the rates that we actually get, but on the resolution, it has to adopt the rates of the state developer fee rates, but we share the developer fees that we receive with the high school district. We get about 66% of the developer fee, and then the high school district gets the other 33. So it's just here for tonight for the board's action to adopt the resolution so we can levy the new rates. We have to wait 60 days, and then we can start using the new rates.
Thank you.
That's it.
Before I ask for questions and comments by the board, I'm going to ask, is any member of the public going to want to make any comments on this item? Okay, I'm going to ask board members for questions and comments, and then eventually a motion. So trustee Gutierrez?
Oh, yeah. So
Does she know? Sorry.
that's okay. My question was going to be in terms of the difference in rates, but you just answered that right now. So that was
Yeah.
the question I had.
Probably to redo the cover page, we would make that really clear. Right.
Thank you.
And Ms. Loga reminded me that we have to have a public hearing. So
All right.
We have to open and close.
Thank you.
Through
Thank you for
through
that reminder.
whenever this process happens, before you
Okay.
take action, we have to have the hearing.
Okay, so I think we'll do the public hearing now and then go on to trustee Lambert. So I'm going to close this regular meeting of the Mountain View Wisman Board of Trustees at 6:45 p.m. and open up the public comment, the public session on this item at 6:45 and 10 seconds, and ask if any member of the public wishes to comment on this item. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public input session on this item at 6:45 and 30 seconds and open it, the regular meeting at 6:45 and 40 seconds. Trustee Lambert.
No questions.
Thanks.
I have a comment, which is, I heard from a comment from a board member from a different district saying that he's interested in school districts around the state, seeing if we can look into raising developer fees in general, because these are rates that haven't been calibrated to modern times. So I don't know if you have a comment for that or just it's something you can put in your hat for thinking about later.
I'll store it away, but absolutely, you're right. When you set a really low rate and over time, basically subject to CPI and whatever other formulas and factors they use, they don't seem to go up as fast as the times are. Though I do keep in mind across the state, these are developer fee rates that are statewide.
Yeah.
And some areas grow a lot faster and some don't, and actually, or some are recessed. So if I need to do that work in my community and I'm not one of those districts or communities that is growing, increasing fees would have a negative impact on that individual or the developer. And this also goes along to people doing work at their house as well. So home improvements. So we just have to keep that in.
Yeah,
It's a
good point.
balance, but absolutely, I'm all for getting as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Nelson?
Are these set by regulation or are these set by statute? Do you know how much we can increase that?
The state allocation board sets the rate. So I don't know if it's not in statute because they meet every 2 years to assess
Okay.
and make adjustments.
Okay. Do they accept public comment and stuff?
At their hearing, yes.
Do you know when the next one?
They
comes
meet
up?
every 2 years and, well, they meet regularly, but they assess and raise potential rates every 2 years in January of the even year. So we just had January of 16. It'll be January of 18 before they meet again to assess and potentially raise developer fee rates.
Okay, thank you. Looking for a motion.
I move that the board approve the resolution number 1585.4/16 developer fee rate increase as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee, I don't see trustee Coladonado's face over there. Okay. Okay, so trustee Nelson, I'm going to need you. I have a motion by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Gutierrez, that the board approve resolution number 1585.4/16, developer fee rates increase based on the presented developer fee study. All in favor say aye.
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 So right now, without the input of trustee Coladonado, who is apparently offline at this point, we have approval by 4 trustees, Ms. Lilga. So that's 4 trustees and no nays. So it's unanimous and it's a quorum. All right? Yeah. So I'd like to proceed. We're going to move on to item 9A, District Testing Report, Trimester 2 Benchmark Assessment Results.
I'm sorry, board. I need
Yes.
to interrupt 1 second. I didn't see Mary Ann here. I'm sorry. She was sort of behind. So I want to introduce a new staff member that we have, which is the Director of Capital Projects.
Oh, wonderful.
So we welcome Miss Mary Ann Duggan as the Director of Capital Projects. Mary Ann comes to us from Cupertino Union School District, where she developed and implemented a $220 million facility bond program covering 25 elementary and middle school campuses and district support facilities. Ms. Duggan received a Bachelor's in Science and Engineering Technology from California Polytech State University and is licensed.
Which one? Okay.
Slow.
Yeah, St. Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And is a licensed professional mechanical engineer. So woman in engineering. It's always a good thing to have her as part of it. And Mary Ann will supervise the construction and renovation of all district facilities, including contract administration, dispute resolution, and change order processing. Please join me in welcoming Mary Ann to the MVWSD family.
Thank you. Would you like to make any remarks or just, Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. All right. And we don't expect you to stay for the whole meeting. Yeah, so, but you're welcome to stay as long as you wish.
Madam President,
Yes?
trustee Caldonado.
There, trustee Coladonado.
Ellen,
Hold on a second. Trustee Coladonado, we just did a vote on the action item because you weren't online. How do we want to approach this? Do we want to go back and let him vote?
if, I would say, since we already voted and we had plenty of votes to pass it, that occasionally we have people stepped out and their vote doesn't get
Okay.
recorded on things and it's no big issue.
What do other people
I don't
say?
know what happened to my internet connection there, but
Yeah.
I'd like to, I intended to vote aye on that motion, so.
All right, so
to the-
on
can
the,
we
in
just
the
make that a
minutes,
5-0 vote, that would be amenable to me.
yeah, so in the minutes, it's going to be reflected as 4-0, but we appreciate the support and we hope you're able to stay online for the rest of the meeting. We see
Ellen?
you're enjoying a beverage as you're, as you're watching our meeting. What,
Ellen,
trustee Nelson?
Point of privilege on item 9C, school size. It is something that could have implications for the bond program and how the budget allocation summary that we have. So I think if we have a new person that's dealing with the bond and facilities and implementation of Measure C, I would prefer that that new person actually be in the meeting when we are discussing that. Though I know everybody reports to you, Dr. Rudolph, but do you understand it's your staff. I would actually like to have this new staff member stay for just that one item.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, you are all right with that, Ms. Duggan? All right. And that will probably be from about 8 to 8:30. All right, district testing report, item A.
Thank you and good evening. I am Tara Victord and here to present to you the trimester 2 benchmark report.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can make this work. Okay, so this evening we'll talk about the development of the benchmarks again. We'll highlight the results of our trimester 2 benchmarks and talk about the next steps that we've started to take and will continue to take as a district based on these results. So you may remember from trimester 1, when we shared with you the way that we approached the development of the benchmarks, and the trimester 2 benchmarks are very similar. We have an assessment task force that meets, including teachers and principals, instructional coaches, and district administrative staff, representing all school sites and all grade levels. And we really look at the assessments, and the committee really focuses on grade level standards, alignment to the elementary report cards, and alignment to the Smarter Balanced assessments that students will take at the end of the year. And we really focus on those Smarter Balanced assessments and the item types and the standards that are being assessed within those benchmarks, and make sure that we really align our district benchmarks and prepare students to be able to take those. In addition, we really did take all of the feedback from our trimester 1 benchmarks through our survey that we provided to teachers, and also through emails and personal meetings, so that we really were including all of the questions or concerns or feedback teachers had about trimester 1, and made sure we addressed those within our trimester 2 benchmarks. Our benchmarks serve multiple purposes. One, of course, is to measure our student progress and mastery of standards that have been taught. We also need to understand our student needs and determine how to differentiate support for all of our students based on their results. We need to understand the needs in terms of content, as well as item types and supports for students in critical thinking skills. And then, of course, we're looking to predict results on Smarter Balanced so that we can really work toward achieving that additional scoring for this year. So we'll begin looking at our language arts scores, and just a few things I want to highlight before we look at the actual scores. All charts reflect the percentage of students who met or exceeded the standard. 65% was set as our target for standard met for trimester 2. The trimester 2 benchmark was given at about 65% through the school year. And so we felt like that was a good, fair standard to meet at this time of the year. Benchmarks are predictive, and so they do cover some material that has not yet been taught. And these benchmarks were administered in February. So keeping all of those things in mind, we'll take a look at some of our results. So if we're looking at our grade level, these are elementary results from grades 1 through 5. We can see that our first grade scores are the highest in the district, and they trend downward through the grade levels, but then we see a spike coming back up in grade 5. When we look at our subgroups, we see that significant achievement gap, particularly for our English learners, and that gap does become more pronounced as the grade levels increase. Very similarly, when we look at our socioeconomically disadvantaged subgroup, we do still see that significant achievement gap here, as well as with our students with disabilities. And all of those subgroups follow that same trend of having the highest scores in first grade, trending downward, and then back up in 5th grade. As we have seen in other trimester benchmark reports and in our SBAC reports, looking at ethnicities, our Asian subgroup outperforms the average scores of our district. Our Hispanic Latino subgroup does have that achievement gap that is very noticeable. And our white students, again, outperform the rest of the district on our benchmarks. Looking at our middle school scores, the trends are very similar to those in the elementary, but I do want to point out, as we mentioned in our trimester 1 report, we expected that the 7th grade scores were going to drop because the trimester 1 benchmark was almost all multiple choice. We added quite a few different item types to trimester 2, and as predicted, we did see that drop in 7th grade scores. So it is not a grand surprise, but something that we're certainly working to improve. Our subgroup scores, like I said, are very, very similar to those in the elementary school. And we do see a significant decrease in scores for our English learners, as well as our socioeconomically disadvantaged subgroup. And in keeping with the trend, our Asian students tend to outperform our average scores. Our Hispanic Latino scores tend to dip back down. And in keeping with the trend, our white students at the middle schools outperform the average scores on the benchmark as well. So a few things that I want to highlight in looking at these scores. The trimester 2 benchmarks were very challenging. They do have higher standards, higher expectations than the trimester 1, and we did add additional item types to really support students in preparing along the way for the upcoming SBAC. And the other piece that I think is pertinent is that unlike math, we do not have a consistent language arts curriculum in our district. And so while these are predictive and everybody's working at a little bit different place. And so it's harder to have those trends and to see those scores when we don't have a consistent curriculum. I will say the ELA ELD task force is working very hard right now, piloting material, and we'll be coming to you in May with some recommendations. So we'll move to our math results, and very much like language arts, all of these charts will represent students who met or exceeded standards on the benchmark. And again, just like math, 65% was used as the target for standard met. Our math benchmarks are predictive and do cover material that has not yet been taught. And our math benchmarks, unlike language arts, do follow the pacing guide in our, from our curriculum. And so there are more items based on what has been taught up to this point in the school year. And our trends are going to look very, very similar in our math results and our language arts. Our first grade scores tend to be the highest in the district and trend downward and come back up a little bit in 5th grade. Our English learners also tend to have that gap, and the gap widens quite a bit in 4th and 5th grade. And I will say part of that is because our 4th and 5th grade math benchmarks really are very heavy with language skills. A lot of word problems that come up. And so that language piece is really pertinent within our math as well as our language arts benchmarks. We do see the same trend continuing with our economically disadvantaged students and our students with disabilities. And going back to our ethnicities, our Asian groups, like our language arts, outperform the average scores in the district. Our Hispanic Latino scores go back down. And by no surprise, in following the trends, our white students are again outperforming the average scores in math in elementary school. And when we look at our math scores in the middle school, very unlike the language arts scores, our 7th grade math scores are the highest in the middle school. Our middle school teachers were very collaborative in creating these benchmarks and really working as a team across both sites to make sure that they were really maintaining the high level of rigor that they were looking for in the assessments. And it was great to work with such a good team. We will see again the very same trends going through. So our English learners do struggle quite a bit with the language content in the math benchmarks. Our economically disadvantaged students still show that achievement gap, though it's not quite as high as it is with our English learners. Our students with disabilities, of course, are showing that gap as well. And then our ethnicities are showing the very same trends in the middle school, with our Asian students performing very high, our Hispanic Latino students performing below the average score, and again, our white students outperforming the average scores on the math benchmarks. So a couple of highlights from our math benchmarks. Of course, we start out with our highest scores in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and we really attribute a lot of this to our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders have had Common Core instruction from the get-go. Our students in the middle school have not had the benefit of all of those years of that really rigorous content and instruction. And so it's clear to see why there might be that kind of a trend going from very high scores where the students are getting that rigorous Common Core instruction for their whole academic lives to having some gaps as we get higher in the grade levels. When we really analyze the data and dig down into it, we can see that the lowest scores on every benchmark were the standards that haven't yet been covered in the pacing guide. So there's no surprise to that. Great to see. The standards that have been taught have much, much higher scores, and the students are performing fairly well on the standards that were taught within the pacing guide. And again, I want to highlight that we do have a consistent curriculum from K through 8, and so we expect to see those scores continuing to rise as students and teachers become more and more familiar with that curriculum. So next steps. The assessments are only as good as what we do with the data we receive from them. And so if you'll remember in trimester 1, we talked about a data protocol that we used with all of our principals who took it back to their staff and did the data protocol. And we used that same process this time and dug a little bit deeper into that data protocol. We did more training with all of our principals and instructional coaches and really dug into using SchoolCity, using all of the report types that were available to really get into the data and analyze what was happening and what we can do to support students. Our principals and coaches took it back to their sites, and every site had a data protocol meeting and really looked at the data on many, many different levels and came up with next steps and things that teachers are going to do to support students between now and the end of the year, and really came up with some great plans that they were able to share back with us. We are going to have a teacher survey at the end of the year, in which all teachers will be given a chance to share their feedback about all of the assessments that we've given throughout the year and help us to make improvements for next year. And then we will continue to do some really deep data analysis. These benchmarks for trimester 1 and trimester 2 this year are baseline data. They're brand new benchmarks. So we really need to take a look at the SBAC results when they come back this summer and analyze our benchmarks and see how they compare to the scores that we'll see on the SBAC. And then, of course, we're looking at all of our student data, looking at our trends and seeing where students need extra support, and really reaching out to other schools and districts to see what they're doing to help close the achievement gaps that we're seeing in our scores with our students.
Just one other point that's set up here. We're also offering additional professional development over the summer, both for the new ELA curriculum that's going to be coming on board. And then again, we're going to offer additional math professional development this summer too for our teachers. And so we're working out the logistics of that to see what happens there. And then the next part is part of what I talked about previously with the board, is that we're going to be piloting a response to intervention program at some of our elementary schools. And the idea here is that we use data in a real-time process to make adjustments to kids that we're seeing that are either needing enrichment or that are struggling, and sort of adjusting our program. And so we're working on the logistics of that and building that out across it. And our goal, and this also will come up in the strategic plan, is the goal is to roll that out to all of our elementary schools, with the idea that we are going to catch kids early and often, so that by the time they get to middle school, we're not seeing the sort of these pronounced gaps. And then we're also working with the middle schools to identify what is a possible scenario or what are the possible avenues that we can do for our RTI pilot program at that level, which will look different than what it looks like at the elementary level, just because of the logistics of how teachers are certified.
Thank you. Next steps continuing on from here, our students in grades 3 through 8 will be taking the Smarter Balanced assessments coming very quickly in April and May. And they also, students in grades 5 and 8 will take the Science CST during that same time. Students whose IEP teams determine they need an alternate assessment will also be taking the California Alternate Assessment within that window. Because students in grades 1 and 2 do not have a statewide test, we will have a trimester 3 benchmark so that we can continue to monitor the growth of those students throughout the course of the year. Our 5th graders will take a math placement test at the end of the year, and we really focus on making very, very certain that we're using some good, strong assessments so that we can place students appropriately in middle school math. Once students get to middle school math, we want to make sure that they continue on the right path. So every student in middle school will take an end of the year math exam as well to see if they need to stay in the same path or move up or move down, and make sure that every child is being challenged at the appropriate level. And then all of our students in grades K through 5 will also be given another reading assessment at the end of the year so that we can use all of their data from all of the different assessments to really make decisions over the summer about supporting our students in the very best way possible.
All right, thank
Any
you.
questions?
So I'm going to do what I did before, which is ask if there's any community comments. And then after that, I'll ask for trustee comments. And I'll note that this is a discussion item. It's not an action item. So are there any members of the community that wish to address the board on this item? All right. Any board members that wish to make comments or have questions?
I have a few questions as well.
Well, you went
I
first
went
last time, so trustee Nelson.
Sure.
And I see trustee Coronado has a question as well. So trustee Nelson?
You can be next to me. Yeah, I had 2 questions. One of them, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. Kathy did a breakout, which needs a little computation for the economically disadvantaged and then the non-economically disadvantaged. So there's a comparison of the effect of economics on our student classes. One of the insights that I've had from research studies is that the issue of if you're economically disadvantaged and white, you're usually at much worse of a educational disadvantage than if your father is black and has a Stanford teacher education master's and an MBA at Stanford and works as an executive at Google. You're probably not, even if you're black, going to be at an education disadvantage. Is it too big of a thing to ask that that breakout will be done as we do these things in general, that ED and non-ED, this non-ED category also be computed again? Okay. When should I remind you that? Because I know once you do the reports are done.
Yeah, we can look at that for future reports.
Okay, we can look at that. Okay, guess I'll be talking with you one-on-one then, right, Dr. Rudolph? Because we can look at that as not an affirmative answer. So I'll talk to you one-to-one when we have our monthly meetings. Is that a good avenue for me to push this agenda?
So Trustee Nelson, my interpretation of his remark and the nodding behind him was that this is what they were going to do in the future. So
That's
I think
your
you should move
interpretation,
on.
Ellen. The second question was, there is the issue of the gap in middle school maybe being worse because of them not having Common Core. Have you looked at what the issue is in the, let's just say this county? Because if that's an effect, and this is predictive of smarter balance, you should be able to see the same effects in that the gap widens in all the elementary schools in this county because of the same reason. If that is the same reason, it should apply throughout the county, shouldn't it? You understand the logic, Dr. Rudolph?
Yeah, we haven't looked at the current SBAC results in that fashion, and we wouldn't have access to another district's benchmark assessments.
Right, but the explanation was this has to do with Common Core. So we should see that in the smarter, if that thesis is true, we should also see that in the smarter balance tests throughout the county. I realize that's
that means that we would have
that's a
to-
two-step thesis.
Are you asking us to survey every county to see if they've adopted the Common Core?
Every school district in the state of California has had to adopt the Common Core. So I'm not sure what that question meant, but
Los Altos actually hasn't adopted a Common Core curriculum. So to answer
in
that,
math,
they haven't. So in order to answer that question, we would actually have to survey every single school district to find out who has a Common Core curriculum and who
there's
doesn't have
30
a
school
Common Core.
districts and not all of them are elementary districts in this county. So you're not willing to do it because it's too much work. Yeah, Ellen, I can
So,
interpret his.
yeah, so again, I have a different interpretation than you, and
Right,
I'll
but
also
I'm
note,
asking the question, Ellen, and it's me talking to the superintendent.
and Trustee
And
Trustee
I
Nelson.
think you're starting to interfere with my question.
So
but I've
Trustee
asked
Nelson,
too
I would
long a
like
question.
to ask, I didn't ask for timed comments as an experiment to see how long people would talk. I would like to not have to time comments tonight, but that's one thing that I was doing here, Trustee Nelson. You don't understand that you spoke for 4
Ellen,
minutes
I
and you still
do
wanted to
not
speak
need
more.
to be lectured by you. If you want to time it, time it. I'm all in favor of it. Put 3 minutes on the clock and I will watch the clock. But please don't act like I'm your child. Okay? I have the same right to answer questions of the trustee as the superintendent as you do. Thank you.
And I will make a comment that I know, and as does Dr. Rudolph, that the county analyzes reports from the school districts in the county and in the state, and there's comparative data that way. Trustee Coladinado, do you have a question or a comment?
Okay, my turn. The question. Sorry, it's a little bit noisy here in this lobby. The question I wanted to ask was, Dr. Rudolph a moment ago had pointed out that we don't have access to other schools, other school districts benchmark assessments, but we're curious to know other school districts benchmarks in first grade and then descending to the fifth grade phenomenon. If they don't something going on, if other districts are seeing that same pattern, then there might be something wrong with this assessment or something skewed in this assessment. So I'm interested to find out more.
Can I say something, Trustee Coladonado? Your remarks are breaking up so much that it's almost impossible to understand what you're saying. And I'm wondering, is there a way for you to type in your comments and they could be read to us?
I think I get the gist of his comment though, or his question, which
Well,
is,
let me ask, for the rest of the meeting tonight, do you have the capability where you are to type in questions and then they could be read to us?
Or email.
Yeah, talk about email to us.
I don't hear everything.
Yeah.
Should I email them in? Is that what you said?
Yeah, email in your questions and then to Ms. Lolga, and then she could read them to us. But Dr. Rudolph says he thinks he understands the gist of what you just asked.
Okay, yeah, I will email what I just asked while you go to Jose. Okay, good idea.
okay. So, but I do think the gist of what he's asking is if we can look at the test scores and see if there's a correlation between the age and if we see a negative decline, we can. We didn't do that initially with our SBAC results. We simply did a face-to-face comparison with us and other districts, but we can do that. It's not something that we did when we looked at the SBAC results. And again, it would only be based off of SBAC results. It wouldn't be based off of any district benchmarks.
Thank you.
The what? The S what?
SBAC.
SBAC,
Which means
CAS, it's the Smarter Balances.
what? Oh, Smarter Balance, okay.
Trustee Gutierrez, you had a question or a comment?
Sure. You can time me if you like.
I think I will. I'll give you 3 minutes, Trustee Gutierrez.
All right. Thank you, Madam President. So, Sue,
Do we have?
when
the
I was here
timer?
last year, I think I had stopped by the board around this time of year and had seen the results up on the presentation that was presented to the community. And the numbers were pretty bleak. The numbers are bleaker now. So what I'm trying to figure out is, in the middle of all this retransition that we have from one curriculum type to another, Common Core, professional development, everything that's in play, what I'm noticing are that the discrepancies are still high. And it's not just an elementary school between certain schools, just all of them, and also in middle school. So my question is simple. With the response that you have for the upcoming school year at Randall's, Marlon, and Therakoff, are we limiting this to just those three schools for whatever reason, or can the other schools also participate? And what do you envision at the middle school level in terms of an intervention pilot program to look like? And if you don't have that vision just yet, perhaps later on, when you do have that, how soon could we expect something like that to be shared with us?
So we're currently working on looking at the middle school process. Part of the question that we had when we met with the middle school principals was also about the issue that came out in the DQR, which is how do we adjust the schedule to provide students with access to all classes. So that one's a little bit more complicated, but we're trying our best to work through and sort of figure out what that's going to look like. I would have to bring that one back. We actually did ask all of the elementary schools if they were interested in working through a pilot. And those were the three schools where the leaders volunteered on the schools, and that the school seemed interested based off of our initial run. We felt that it would be good to take a baby step to do it and to work out the bugs. And the next year, each elementary school has been informed that every school will have an RTI system across the board. Most schools have it in some type of variation. So it's a matter of tweaking it and making it a uniform process across the district. So there are some schools, Castro, Huff, Bub, that have it. And if you look at Bub is actually piloting a different version of RTI. They're piloting theirs with science, and we're piloting the other three with intervention teachers. So we're trying to see which one is a bigger bang for the buck, and then we will bring that back and sort of say, based off of this, here's what we're seeing, and then we'll say this is what we're going to roll out across all elementary schools. Middle school is a little bit more complicated just because of the schedule, our desire to try and get every kid access to all of the classes, and then a couple other logistical items, but we are working on trying to determine what it's going to look like at the middle school level.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Lambert, you
No
have a question?
questions.
Okay, I have a question for Tara. And I think we've all kind of been talking about this tonight. You showed us charts where the first grade scores are high and then they dip and then they rise back again in fifth grade. Do you have a theory for why that dip happens?
I do have a theory, and this is just based on looking at the questions, the rigor of the assessments. First grade tests are completely multiple choice, and many of the questions can be read aloud to the students. In second grade, they're all read by the students, but again, are multiple choice with just one or two different question item types that are not as complex as they become in third grade. Once we get to third grade, the item types become very different, and students are having to do multiple different actions to be able to answer a question. It's not as simple as just selecting the right answer. Sometimes they have to select 3 correct answers, or drag and drop items, or highlight multiple things within a paragraph to be able to show what they know. And those are very new skills for our students. And I do believe that that's a large part of the change in the scores and the drop in the scores. If you'll remember, in trimester 1, fifth grade had our lowest scores. And I think the fifth grade teams
Yeah.
really looked very, very carefully at all of those item types and really supporting students in understanding how to tackle different kinds of questions like that, and worked really, really hard over the course of the next couple of months to work on those critical thinking skills, and their scores in trimester 2 really showed the work that had been done. And I think that's the beauty of the data protocols and the teachers really looking and analyzing all of the item types and the actual curricular items within the tests, is that they're really looking at it and understanding what they can do with students at the end of the benchmark to support them and help them really grow forward in mastering standards and skills.
That's very positive. Thank you. Any other questions by the board before we move on? And I'll note that we don't, hold on a second, we don't have Trustee Coladonado's face on the screen out there again. So, Trustee Nelson, you said you had an additional comment?
Yeah, rather than a question. I'm glad Jose Trustee Gutierrez brought up that issue with the RTI, because part of the reason for us doing this isn't we just want to see what testing was, but to do some action based on that. Data that doesn't result in action isn't very useful data. And I really think the idea of we're doing alpha testing. Okay, we're trying this on these 3 things, and then we have an option. We're doing, besides plan A, we're trying plan B, and we're alpha testing plan B too, but just on one site. So I like it that there's will be a comparison, not just we'll try this and it's go for broke and we don't have a backup plan if that doesn't work nearly as well as we thought. Of course, 3 to 1 is still not balanced, but hey, you use the money that you have for experiments in a way that you think is most efficient. So, and I think the other thing is, at least this RTI being coordinated between 3 different sites, we're starting to meet the criticism that we were a conglomeration of schools rather than a school district, and that things were being done unrecognizable sometimes between one school and another to try to get to the same, to fix the same problem. So I hope this is a good example of administrative excellence in how we use data and how we try to introduce new programs, and decide between two.
Okay, and before we end this, I'd like to thank you for your report. And I don't know if this was yours in the entirety or if Ms. Bauer contributed to it too, but thank you very much. Okay, and I made a mistake. We're all experimenting with this new agenda online. We were supposed to go back to the consent items that were pulled from the consent calendar after our action item. So Trustee Nelson, you wanted to bring up 2 items under
Well, what
consent?
schedule are we running? Because we can put it at the end of
No,
this.
I'd like to do it
Okay.
now. So you had talked about item G and then contract number 1 under J.
Yeah, gee.
Oh, hold on. Let's wait and see. Before we move on to this, is this on the prior agenda item?
Oh, it came
So
up?
we're going to hear an email from Trustee Caladonato.
All right, so his question is, I realize that MVWSC doesn't have access to other districts' interim assessment results. Nevertheless, do we know if other districts in Santa Clara County are using the same interim assessments as we are? If we don't know, what would be involved in finding out? I think it would be valuable to find out if other districts that use the same assessments that we do see a peak in first grade, a decline or third or fourth or grade, and then a slight rise at the end of elementary schools. Perhaps it would be helpful to benchmark these benchmarks, so to speak. So we are aware that other districts are using the assessment. We just don't have access to their actual data. One of the things that we're going to do at the end of this year is we're going to look at how the results from these assessments actually compare to the SBAC results to see if it's a fair one. We know last year's assessments that we use sort of came in around 95%, I think. Was it that high? It was last year's were pretty accurate, but a lot of the feedback that we got was just that it was not as rigorous as some of the SBAC assessments. So we will be able to assess that at once we get the results in. The problem is that will be probably late August when that actually occurs, August to September, but we will look at that. And we can ask other districts that are using School City sort of their take on the assessments, but whether or not the superintendents will provide us access with their actual data is another story.
Okay, thank you. And if Trustee Caladonato or anyone is watching this in our taped report, they'll hear that answer. Thank you. Okay, Trustee Nelson, going back to consent. Yes. Okay, well, we're sorry about that, but he'll be able to watch us, so he won't be able to participate, which is unfortunate. But well, thanks for letting us know, Trustee Caladonato. All right, Trustee Nelson.
Yeah, this item has to do with authorization of signatures to do contracts, to sign off on contracts. I am going to vote no on this. And the reason has to do, in the district quality report, one of the items that came up, this is item factors that limit district effectiveness, is items, I don't know how you say I, small i's. System for assuring expenditures are approved and accounted for are not established, such that people are signing for expenditures without going through appropriate protocols for accountability and sound fiscal decision-making. I haven't yet seen a report from the district administration that explains how that has been solved, or how this way of doing signing off on contracts solves that problem. I tend to be worried that this is just a small chance, like wearing fiscal responsibility seatbelts, that there was a problem in a county, excuse me, in our county next door, where the gentleman who signed bogus contracts, even in a very wealthy district that supposedly had smart people on its board, ended up in jail for a year because of misappropriation of public funds. And in the paper yesterday or the day before, somebody from the Association of Bay Area Governments finagled almost $5 million of bonds and invested it in an account for his parents and him. And he's now going to jail for a year and a day. So I haven't seen anything that says, for instance, the people signing these are going to be bonded. And I assume something like somebody bonded for signing signatures means there have been at least minimal looking at what their fiscal integrity is as individuals, like credit checks. And that we could see that all these people who were giving author, or not we see, that the superintendent can tell us that all these people signing these things have had credit checks, that a bonding agency has looked at those credit checks and says, these are people that we're willing to write a bond from, maybe if, which is like an insurance thing, that if there's any problem from these people over $10,000, we agree to do it. So I'm going to vote no, because I don't think this criticism of how district finance is done and how signatures are done, there has not been an explanation, a report to us, a written report of how this problem has been solved or how this way of doing it solves that problem.
So Dr. Clark or Dr. Rudolph, would you like to respond to that?
So I just want to remind the board that when we brought the change in the signing procedures, we explained that essentially everything that we sign has to have at least 2 signatures on it. One being either has to come from Dr. Clark or myself has to sign, and then there must be another cabinet member. In fact, I can't even get a reimbursement without having Dr. Clark sign for money that I would have spent while going to get a cheeseburger. So there are safeguards in place, and we explained those earlier. And I don't think we were ever asked for actual written report to explain the actual procedures. But what I can assure you is that, as we said in the previous meeting when we made this change, that there are tons of safeguards now in place to assure that no POs, requisitions are actually paid for without some type of senior level signature on it.
So these ones are just POs and requisitions, they're not contracts for this particular resolution?
If you're speaking about the actual, this item,
Yeah.
these are contracts. And your
That
question
I
that you
thought they
submitted
were
prior,
contracts.
and the question
So
that,
if contracts need 2 signatures, there's that contract on the next item that has only Dr. Clark's signature and not a second signature. So yeah, I would appreciate it if you do have internal policy on covering these things that you think answers. To me, it's a very serious issue when your audit says you don't seem to have controls out over how things are signed. That's extremely serious. It has to do with the use of taxpayer money. Not that they're being misappropriated, but so I would appreciate that, and then I won't bring up this kind of bother to you.
Well, I do think that there is an illusion that you're saying that we are misappropriating money and that we are just signing contracts willy-nilly. I think you should allow Dr. Clark to finish his statement to say what the error on the sheet of paper was that will sort of satisfy why it's over the $87,000 amount.
so the 2 things, one, contracts in this.
That's the next item, and I'll be glad to discuss that then. So I'm willing to vote on this item, whatever.
So Dr. Clark, do you want to
5G.
provide a fuller explanation?
Thank you. I
now?
was just going to clarify that there's nothing in district policy that states that 2 signatures need to be on an actual contract. So
Okay,
typically-
so what he said, I misinterpreted when he said 2 signatures?
I don't know what you interpreted, but practice in the district is that there's one signature on a contract, but to actually pay that contract, to create a purchase order, a purchase requisition, two signatures have to approve that. Two cabinet level members have to sign off on a purchase requisition in the district.
Thank you. Any other comments by any other board members? Okay, I need a motion and a second.
Which item is this? G?
G.
I move that we approve item G of the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Gutierrez, that the board approve item G from the consent agenda. And I will note that trustee, hold on a second, that trustee Coladonato has had to absent himself from the meeting because his online presence got disconnected. So he is not here live. So now we are 4 people voting with one person who said that he's not going to vote in favor of this, which means all 3 of us need to vote in favor of this. Did you have a comment you wanted to make, trustee Nelson? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so motion passes 3-1. Gutierrez, Lambert, Wheeler. In opposition, trustee Nelson, and absent is trustee Coladonato. Now, you also pulled contract number 1 from consent item J, trustee Nelson.
Yeah, and I think the written explanation that we got when I put in this question on Tuesday morning got answered fine. It was just which category it goes under. Sometime I'll have to figure out what the real difference between those 2 terms are, because if it doesn't really matter where it is. So I think when the motion to pass those is done, you'll have to do it. I do have a question though, that you didn't seem to understand, that that I was referring to the $209,000 new program to send students to Yosemite. Okay, that is at $200,000. That's 1/10 of all our students. The 8th grade is about 1/10 of our student base. It's a pull-out program because they no longer are in school. They're out of the classroom for those 5 days. It's a new program in terms of this year was the first year that it applied. And so I think if it's in the first or second year, it's a new program. And the resources that it's pulling is $200,000, which is higher than the $170,000 summer academic programs. Is that correct?
That this
you and I-
program, that this program's been in place for 2 years? Yes.
And that it's a $200,000, over $200,000?
Yes, and it's also subsidized by the foundation
And
And
it's
donations.
also,
and
okay,
donations, yes. And parents also pay to subsidize the cost too. And they
okay,
also make donations because the
Here's-
cost is actually higher than
okay.
200,000.
Here's a problem I have with this new way you're accounting for these contracts. There is no indication in our minutes, as there used to be, that this is a multiple fund, which fund was going to fund this. It has a number, $209,000 total, but it doesn't say $100,000 of that is being paid for MVEF. Our old way of the financial officer reporting contracts always said what the contributions were to a total. I have a hard time understanding where money is flowing when that isn't explained in the minutes or in the packet in the minutes, and I have to vote on it. So if you're giving me, I don't think it's an acceptable way to do governance. If you're going to continue to do this, I'm going to continue to pull things out every single meeting on contracts that are not well explained where the money's coming from, because I can tell where the money's going, but I can't tell where the money's coming from to pay for this contract. So I hope you realize there's
That's-
clash.
it's
There's
well
going to
within
be
your rights to
public
pull
policy
any item.
clash every single meeting. Every single time you present these contracts without explaining where the money's coming from to pay for them, there'll be public policy clash.
It's
Um,
well within your rights.
Right. What I want to know is where's the academic justification for this? I've not seen any result where taking kids out for a week in the 8th grade so they can't get their math and their science, it improves our district scores for our kids who are behind or the rest of our kids. Do you have any academic data for this program?
So we
Of
did
our
an
students?
assessment on the Yosemite program, No.
Academic assessment,
No.
okay.
but this
And the
program's
last-
also been in place for 2 years and is supported by the community and the foundation. And it seems to be a desire of our community to actually have our kids go to Yosemite, which is one of our national treasures. So
I understand, and we also have lots of national treasures. The other thing you didn't seem to understand is we've had 2 recent surveys of teachers, and those surveys have said, including the LCAP strategic plan survey, says the teachers have noted a lack of participation in decision-making. I would really like to know what kind of confidential feedback there is. Confidential meaning it isn't a teacher has to stand up and go against the principle of whether this should be done or not, but that people that are employees, some who have said they felt when they've said negative things about programs, they're sort of targeted, that if they give a minus delta for feedback, they're considered not going along with the team. I would really like to know what the survey of the teachers shows for this. Do they like giving up a week of instruction for this particular program? Would they rather have the $200,000 spent on their professional development during the summer? Do they think that would be better? Or do they agree that this is something that raises the academic level of students? And it's the thing that they should have 2 weeks rather than 1 week. We should spend $400,000.
So
This seems
trustee
like a-
Nelson, I'm going to call for a vote.
Fine.
Is there a motion?
Those are my questions. And you did answer one of them. You answered 2 of them.
Is there a motion to approve contract number 1 under consent item J?
I make the motion to approve contract number 1 from item J of the consent agenda.
I second the motion.
Okay, and I'll note again that we're 4 trustees up here. We need 3 to approve this item. All in favor of contract number 1 under item J in the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, for the minutes, the ayes were trustee Gutierrez, Lambert, and Wheeler. The nays were trustee Nelson, and absent was trustee Coladonado. Another interruption to our regular agenda is I'm going to do personal privilege and note that our teacher union president arrived and at a time that was later than the scheduled agenda time. So I'm going to allow Mr. Farazan to make a report if he wishes.
I'm learning how to adjust to the new agenda
I
as
know.
well. It's hard to pull up a lot of those docs sometimes. So, we've been in some communication about agendizing the proposal out there, the state proposal for the Children's Education Healthcare Protection Act. And so I would encourage the board to agendize that in a future meeting for resolution. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, next week's spring break, and wish you all a good break. And we're, as teachers, we're sort of, this week was open house week. And then when we come back from spring break, we're going to jump right into testing. And as we heard in the report from Tara, it's very rigorous, what's going on, the testing. So it's going to be, I know at 5th grade, it's 3 weeks because we do science as well as English language arts and mathematics. And then it's the end, moving up. So we're sort of in the stretch run after we come back from break. And so, it's an exciting time. And it's also a time when teachers are looking around at other districts and different situations are going on. So it's also a lot of movement happening in throughout the educational community at this time. And but thank you.
I have a question. You sent the trustees a resolution
Right.
that we can put on our agenda for next time, and that's for the kind of generic name of that resolution is it's the extension of Proposition 30. Is that correct?
Right. It's called the Children's Education and Healthcare Protection Act of 2016.
Yes. And so I have a question.
Okay.
Has all of those kinds of things, I think, need to collect signatures and get.
That's right.
Yeah. So my question is, has this initiative collected its signatures already, or is it still
It's in the
just
process of
it's in the
doing that.
process? Okay. But we could still have a resolution of support while it's collecting signatures.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ellen? if-
Yes?
If you would, I'm not quite sure how to do this, but if you would like to direct the secretary of the board to put that on as an action item next meeting?
Yes, I've already done that.
Okay, because I definitely support doing that.
Thank you.
You should be able to knock that off very quickly.
All righty. So now we're on to item 9B. And I'm going to readjust my handwritten time here. So strategic plan update. So that this will be from about 7:50 to 8:10, and school size will now be from, 8:20. School size will now be 8:20 to 8:50 for those of you following at home. All right, thank you. Superintendent Rudolph.
So I'm here to talk about sort of to give you a strategic plan update and talk about sort of where we are with the process. So the first thing is that our district quality review called for us to create a clear and relevant strategic plan. It's one of the things that was cited that we needed a plan of action if we plan on improving student achievement. And one of the things it said is that we need long, short, and interim goals, which focus directly on improving outcomes for all kids. So I want to take us through where we've been, and then also go to sort of where we currently are and get your feedback on a couple of goal statements. And sort of talk about the power of those goal statements. So just to recap, just sort of where we are. Again, this is sort of a reiteration of the last presentation, which is us by the numbers. So we've had, in the last couple of sessions, we've had 107. That number is just a little bit off, but there was six groups represented. We do now take attendance in these meetings to make sure that we have an accurate account. And we had almost 3,000 surveys. I sent the survey results to you so you have access to that. And we're looking at also possibly doing a different type of stakeholder survey. I'll talk about that at a later point, but about 3,000 surveys, which is actually a very high number across the board. And so we had 39 meetings over 6 weeks with 13 companies represented: Synopsys, Microsoft, NASA, Veritas, LinkedIn, YMCA, CSMA. And so what we came to is that there are really 5 goals that we need to look at. And these goals will sort of change in at least the name, but for layman's terms, it's simple: student achievement, achievement gap, culture, human capital, and then resource management. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what goal statements for each one of those and how that drives the actual actions that will take place in the strategic plan. So before we get that, let's talk about Kili, one of my favorite places to go. So a year ago when I climbed Kilimanjaro, it was 17 of us, and we were raising money for Livestrong Cancer. And Livestrong decided to set a goal for us. In order to raise $10,000 per person, we want you to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, the purpose is that they said, we want you to climb to summit Kilimanjaro. They didn't tell us which way that we had to go. They simply said, this is direction by which we want you to do things. And what they allowed each person to do, or each group to do, is to sort of choose the route that they wanted. If you can see with Kili, there are essentially 7 different ways that you can get to the summit, right? So we actually took the Rongai route, which is one of the longer ones, but you can take any passage you want. So the point of this is to say, when we think about goal statements, I want you to think about it from the sense of it is a general aim. You're telling us that you want us to reach a particular summit by which you're now driving us to choose certain actions. We can choose different paths, but at the end of the day, we must reach the summit that you set, which is part of what the board does. So we know that we got to get to a summit. So your goal statements are really the equivalent of saying that we are going to summit Kilimanjaro or any other type of mountain. And so I say that in context because oftentimes when we think of goal statements, we think of it in terms of, well, I have to put a goal right there. And eventually we will have SMART goals under each one. But in the initial part, we want the goal summary to be the overarching idea of where you want us to go. All right, so what are goal statements? So there's clear statements that present an overarching vision of a goal. They serve as a destination point, right? So when we talk about student achievement, we need to set a destination point for all of our kids by which it drives all of our actions. They are umbrellas for the strategies and the actions that we are going to take over the case. What they are not specific actions, right? And so I want to distinguish that by saying, you may say we want every student to be technologically literate and this, and this, but it doesn't say the specific action by which we're going to take. That's not the purpose of the actual goal statement at this time. And again, we'll be bringing back other pieces of it, but this is the important part. You identified the goals. Now we're going to talk about where we want to go. They're not SMART goals. We will have a time and a place for an actual SMART goal, but what I'm trying to do is just frame the conversation, just keep it at a higher level for this particular meeting. They're not specific in nature in terms of the very myopic focus on one particular skill. They are sort of the aspirations for what we aspire for our kids to do, what we aspire to do with the achievement gap, what we aspire to do for student achievement, what we aspire to do with human capital. And they're not strategies or metrics. And again, those items come as a result of the actual vision that you set for the district. All right, so I apologize that this is pretty small. I've made an adjustment, but just so you can see, here on the left-hand side, it talks about the DQR. And so I want to let you know this, again, I want to remind us that this has been a year-long process that we've had. We started with understanding what our current reality is. And so what you can see is that in the district quality review, it said to establish a district-wide expectation that all students will be prepared for grade level or higher course work upon entering high school. And so our goal statement is, our draft of a goal statement is that every student will be prepared for high school and the 21st century citizenship. And so I'll talk about that in a little bit more, but that's where we sort of are. So I wanted to link the two together so that you can see that these goals come from a real place, a real assessment, and a real sort of desire that I've gathered from you that says that we must tackle a couple things. We must make sure all of our kids are succeeding at high levels. We must close the achievement gap. We must maintain a highly qualified staff. We must make sure that we're reasonable stewards and responsible stewards of our resources. And we must make sure that we include an inclusive culture. And we're going to go into these a little bit deeper, but I want to make the parallel connection between the two, just so you can see it. So let's talk about the first goal statement. And what I'm looking for here is actually for you to provide feedback in terms of what the draft actually says. If there are things that you want to add for it, we want to make sure that we capture that. If there are things that you want to be removed, I want to make sure I capture that. And then I will bring these drafts back to you as we work through them. So the first goal, student achievement, encompasses the performance for all students. And it's natural that when we start thinking about student achievement, we obviously go to sort of the two polar opposites, right? We think of our highest kids and we think of our lowest kids, and we start thinking about how do we meet their needs, and we need to really think about all of our kids across the spectrum. And so this really is an opportunity for academic press, or what we would call rigor. It's about curiosity. It's about personalization. It's about emerging trends in tech and education. And so it encompasses all of those aspirations that we have for all of our kids and sort of that profile of a graduate that we've been working on. And so the draft goal statement that we have right now is that every student will be prepared for high school and 21st century citizenship. And so what I'd like is for you to just provide feedback about your thoughts on this one, and then we'll keep working through each one. I'll capture it, and then we'll bring back another iteration at the next board meeting with some extra things, and we'll keep wordsmithing those. And then eventually you'll see us bring that plus actions, plus mission, plus vision, plus core values. We'll bring all of those pieces to you with the goal to have the strategic plan, a final strategic plan brought to you by June 2nd.
Okay, you want our feedback?
Yep, this is up to you.
All right. Feedback from the trustees.
Where are you going to start?
Let's start with you, Trustee Lambert.
Every student will be prepared for high school. I'd like to see that finesse a little bit more. I think what you're really trying to get at is to achieve in high school, to be successful in high school, something like that.
Mhm.
I think the recognition is that the kids need not only to be able to succeed in our own school district, but when we're then graduating into our high-powered, local high school districts, they need to succeed in that environment as well and be prepared for that.
Okay.
Academically and socially.
And I agree with what Trustee Lambert said. I like the draft goal statement, but I'd like it to be more ambitious as well. But I would like to comment that I really appreciated how you had that, and admittedly, small words on a screen, but the comparison between the DQR and the strategic plan work, that it all made sense to me. And I think it's a good way to move forward.
Okay.
Trustee Nelson.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with the statement as it is up there. One of the things is I'm not quite sure what Dr. Lambert is talking about, because we could use what our graduation rate is at high school to determine if we're being successful as a school district. Or we could use what is our number of A to G students, particularly in our subclasses when they're in high school. I think the statement as it is now is more, we're going to get them ready to go like to college if we were a high school district. And a part of it is if they get into colleges, what their acceptance rate is. But I think it's a little bit of stretch to say, and we're going to follow to see how many graduates we have in 4 years as a high school district. I don't know if there are high school districts that can do that. With CalPads, of course, we could do this if we wanted to use all our students are taking A to G requirements in high school. That shows we've had a successful pass off. But I think you can have two ambitious goals. No Child Left Behind was too ambitious a goal. And so I like, if you said we're trying to get 95% in passage of advanced or passing the standards, that would be a very ambitious goal in 8th grade, and it doesn't have anything to do with how many go on to Caltech or Berkeley or Stanford or whatever once they're in high school. So I'm fine with that statement as it is.
Trustee Gutierrez.
I like this as a opening talking point. But I don't know. I'm with Bill, with Trustee Lambert, that I think we should try and be a little bit more clearer with our expectations, because right now they're not. Right now that students just, that draft goal statement is just that. It's a draft goal.
not the reality. So how we get there is a different process, right? And I want to balance this out with also some reality. That's my 2 cents worth for now.
Okay, so the feedback I got is to finesse it a little bit, to include something about achievement, and or be successful in high school, especially considering the high powered high school district that our students are going to. So finesse it a little bit to sort of encapsulate that. Any other feedback that we want to put with it? Just up and
Here's Trustee Caladonato. Looks like in a different setting. Trustee Caladonato, have you been following this conversation?
Not all of the strategic planning conversation, but parts of it, yes.
Do you want to make a comment now?
No, I just want to let you know that I found a better internet connection.
Okay,
Now I'll
thank you.
Hopefully
So-
connect to the rest of the meeting.
I don't know how to make it elegant and, so, it's difficult to look at something like this and make a few comments and then, I don't want it to turn into something that becomes unwieldy. But I know that a lot of us are interested in students from our district being prepared to move into A through G requirement courses in high school. And I think that's what we want. I don't think we want to say it in a goal statement, but
Right.
if there's some way we could, make the language,
so I can tell you on this one, the draft goal, the actual draft SMART goal, and we're working with the high school to see if we can measure this or what's the appropriate way to see how many of our kids are actually prepared to take A through G courses.
Mhm.
And so once we establish what the baseline is, we would then set what the metric is. So that's under
Okay.
the SMART goal or
Okay.
the
Yeah.
goal statement. So it does have a SMART goal component, but I want to make sure
Yeah.
that we capture the essence of what you're thinking in terms of a vision for all students succeeding.
Mhm.
That will sort of drive and sort of refine some of the action statements that we put out there.
Mhm.
Okay.
well, and that's useful to hear that there's more underneath this, more
it's a
specificity
lot more.
underneath it. Okay.
Okay. So let me go to the next one. This is good.
Oh,
Um,
excuse me. When you said you're going to do them one at a time, you're talking about you're doing all 5 tonight?
I'm getting your input for these. Yes.
Just the upper
Yes.
level,
The
just the upper level.
the goal statements, not the actual.
Right.
Yeah.
Within
Okay.
30 minutes, you're asking for this?
Yeah, do the next one.
Go get it.
We can handle it.
Let's keep going. This is actually this part. The first one moved fast. So the second one encompasses the achievement gap. And so what we want to do is increase all students' performance in English language arts, mathematics, and science as measured by designated assessments to close the achievement gap between subgroups of students. So that sort of capture the essence of what you're talking about. Would you like to add something to it? Is there something missing? Yes.
That's the essence in this. I think it's way too long though. I would just say the achievement gap closure. Because what
Okay.
you're talking about is Common Core plus, I don't know if they're going to be measuring history again.
Okay.
But, by putting all those little extra components, I think that's the next level down.
Okay.
The-
Okay.
um,
That's
Because
good.
some of the things is, like human capital also includes socio-emotional learning, maybe. I don't know if that's what you intended it.
Okay.
So this is more just the academic achievement gap closure. I don't know. I
So Trustee Caladonato, do you want to make a comment?
No, I don't have any comment on this item. I don't think that we can give robust comment on 5 different elements of the strategic plan in the half hour. So hopefully, if the superintendent wants feedback on all 5 of these items from all 5 trustees, we should schedule this again and have a little more time for it, I think. End of comment.
So I'll make a comment reacting to Trustee Nelson's comment, which is, I know this isn't as elegant as a, simple sentence, but I think everything in this sentence is meaningful. And I understand why English language arts, math, and science are on here because those are the subjects that are tested in the state tests. So I would like disagree with trustee Nelson that he'd want this to be simpler because I think we need something as robust as this to be meaningful.
So you agree with him, right?
Correct. Trustee Lambert?
Yeah, yeah. So reading the statement, the first few words there, I don't mean to nitpick, but I'm a little curious. So increase all students' performance to close an achievement gap. Increasing all students' performance is going to lift everybody up and maintain an achievement gap. So there, I understand that's not what you mean,
Mhm.
but again, and at the same time, we don't want to focus on the
Mhm.
on the lowest learners. That though that I'm convinced that would raise everybody's scores up.
Correct.
But there's there's something a little more targeted. I think that you're trying to grasp here is really focus on the kids who the students who are having difficulty right now.
Okay.
And that's the subgroup. I think that's a subgroup of our students that you're really trying to target with this goal.
Okay.
And it needs to be more focused on them
Okay.
in particular.
Trustee Gutierrez?
If I look at this statement, I'm thinking we take out students, replace it with academic, increase all academic performance in English language arts, mathematics, and science, or sciences as measured by the designated assessments to reduce the achievement gap. And I would take out between subgroups of students and include instead within our district.
Okay. Okay.
If that long portion is going to stay in, that's fine. But I would move the sentence around, sort of like Dr. Lambert was talking, is that we start it with achievement gap closure by, and whatever kind of wording Trustee Gutierrez was suggesting. So
Okay.
right up front, we're starting the sentence with something that shows what the main component of this goal is.
Okay.
And it sort of answers what Bill was talking about, which is one of my worries too. That this isn't,
Yeah. We'll wordsmith it. We'll bring back a couple examples at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So next one, real quick. And again, this is to capture the essence. So every student, staff, family member, and community member will feel valued and supported, as well as enjoy working, learning, and partnering with Mountain View Westman School District.
So I'll go next and I'll say, I think this one is perfect. Trustee Nelson?
right now I agree with you, but who knows what my colleagues may say. They may say something that others.
Okay, and I skipped over trustee Coladonado. Do you have a comment? Okay, he's going like this.
It's discussion
Trustee
time.
Gutierrez.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. So I would change the will feel. If I'm going just by this and I'm going to make a suggestion, I'd go with every student, staff, family, and community member is valued
Mhm.
and supported
Okay.
within or can enjoy within our district working, learning, and partnering with. See, that second part I think is too, I think it's too much.
Okay.
I think for this one, I would go with the dramatic effect for the first part, right? Is valued and supported.
Okay.
Stop and then continue on with the train of thought with the partnerships and the learning environment and the working environment, because I think that's too broad of a
Okay.
sentence. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Trustee Lambert.
Yeah, I'd like to try to get some wording in there to pull in the goals and that the fourth bullet item under the goals and compass, that getting in, getting that in the our corporate community or
Okay.
corporate culture, our educational, higher educational cultures around here.
Okay.
And community is part of that, but even more.
Okay.
More inclusive.
So I'll add one more thing. And so I disagree with, so yes, I want something absolute, but I think this is an item where we want people to feel this. No, so to say it is so, I think people need to feel it. So I do like the word feel in there so that they feel valued, not that they are valued, because it, you know,
Sure.
what does that mean?
Well, it goes either way.
Yeah.
It's just a different perspective. but
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
I think like survey stuff is usually how you feel, right? I mean, that how you feel is a valued, is an absolute accurate assessment when you do a survey. How you feel, you can tell them exactly how you feel. Why they can't say whether somebody else seems sort of external, which is what you're trying to get to, I think. I don't know this thing about making it too long. I don't know if there's another place to put the rest of the community is what I think Dr. Lampert was
Mhm.
talking about. In that we have in our current goal statement, the fourth one down, talking about the rest of the community. So
Can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Yeah.
yeah, so I understand you're wanting to be shorter and I understand you wanting to keep that in, and I don't, both are valid, I think.
Okay.
Two more. We're almost there. Next one is
We
human
still
capital.
haven't had community comment either.
I know. Mountain View Richmond School District will invest in the intentional development of teachers, leaders, and staff to ensure that we are the place talented educators choose to work.
Okay, trustee Caladonato.
That's, no comments on that sentence at this time. That's fine.
Thank you. Trustee Nelson.
I think it's fine.
Trustee Gutierrez.
What's the intent behind intentional development? Why not professional development? I want to know what the thinking is on that one.
So the intentional development would lead to possibly career ladders. It could lead to mentoring. I mean, it would be an intentional, robust. It's beyond just professional development that we do, but it could be mentoring and all those other aspects of it. Leadership opportunities across all levels. But the idea is that we're intentional. It's not a afterthought. It doesn't just happen. It is that this is a part of the way that we actually operate, and that every staff member will get development to grow with their craft.
Like purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Purposeful development.
Okay.
I also like this statement. I think the word choose is perfect.
Okay.
So it could be one or the other, but I like the word intentional.
All right. One more.
So
Sorry.
so it's sort of answering this district quality thing, saying, putting formal system in place for monitoring and supporting professional growth of staff at any level. Right? I mean, that's essentially
Yes, that's
saying, and we have something in our 12 years ago thing that was sort of similar, and this is a.
Yeah, and it can also include things like intentional feedback. So not intentional evaluation, but intentional feedback of doing the right thing. All right, last one, which is resource management. And so this one is staff and students will have the resources, training, and environment they need to fulfill the mission of MVWSD.
Trustee Gutierrez.
Staff and students will have the resources, training, and environment they need to fulfill the mission of. And would we be able to add, or should we not, academic, and staff and students will have the resource, training, and environment they need? I'm not sure. I like the message, but I'm thinking maybe we can use a different wording. Staff and students will have the resources, training, and we will provide a positive environment to fulfill the mission of MVWSD.
Okay.
I want to incorporate the us and them somehow in the section where environment is. So it's more of that one team mentality.
Okay. Got it. I think I got the essence of it.
Trustee Lambert.
In this short time, I I don't have a good replacement, but I'd like to be more specific about, on the last phrase, the need to fulfill the mission of the Mountain View Westman School District. I'd like to see that replaced by, you know, I'm at a loss for words, to be honest.
Okay.
But something more specific.
Strategic plan.
Well,
Okay.
Move on. Yeah.
Let me play around with it.
yeah.
I think I know where you're headed, which is this is part of the process, right? So it's about trying to capture what you're thinking. So I think I have
Yeah,
an idea.
I'm trying to put my place in,
Mhm.
like in my office and right, telling people, you know, this is what I need to be able to do my job. Okay. But this is what my job is. I need to be able to do these things.
Okay.
So I'd like it to be a little more explicit about financial health. So I really like the bullet demonstrating responsible stewardship, and there are words up there that refer to money, but I have to kind of dig around in this goal statement to understand that we're talking about a financially secure district.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, I'm sort of confused about this, maybe because I can't see all the sub bullets. But if this goal statement is trying to do a goal and do an action and so I'm confused. So what kind of resources are you talking about? It's confusing. And I don't even know, I mean, is it a mission or missions? Because different people in our district have different parts of the mission that they're doing. You could say we're all trying to do education for the world ahead, but so I don't know. It's very amorphous for me. I don't really get much out of it. I don't know how I'd be inspired to try to meet that goal because there's this thing about I can't fight Proposition 13, even though that sucks away a lot of resources that would go to schools. In this case, it's like we could allocate the resources we have the best way and with a little bit go get other resources.
Okay.
So to guarantee you will give somebody the resources that they want, I don't know. Anyway, I'm confused.
Yes, Trustee Gutierrez?
So I think this goes back to the point that other trustees have made where it might be best to just focus in on this more specifically as the process moves on so that we have better time to be able to synthesize this and come up with something more concrete where our opinions will drive this to a higher level and with your help. I kind of feel like we're rushed a little bit with this. I'm not sure I feel too comfortable with the process, but I'm trying to participate as best as I can.
So at the next board meeting, you're actually going to get drafts, right? And so again, this is taking the goals that you espoused last time and said, yes, these are the right goals, and then trying to capture your individual thoughts. And now we'll take it back over the next 2 weeks and sort of wordsmith it and bring something back to you. So you'll have a lot more, and this will be a longer topic, but it's right now it sort of felt like we were shooting in the dark. And so now there's a better sort of direction in terms of what each person is thinking and sort of what you're thinking collectively.
Thank you. Trustee Nelson, you had one more thing you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's to answer one of the things that Trustee Gutierrez was saying. The last one is the one that I felt was not, but I think some of the earlier ones, we did focus in on them. So, you know, at the end is maybe it's better that the one at the end was the one that I felt really sort of shaky about too. And I didn't quite see how it came from the previous thing we did, but I felt we have made some progress on those 3 or 4 earlier ones. And those were a little bit more cohesive.
As my mom said, be careful what you wish for, right? Well, next board meeting, we have a lot more time on each one of these, but I needed some direction in terms of what to draft.
Helen, thank you for this. I know you put a whole lot of time into this, and community members and business leaders have put a lot of time on this. Ms. Loga, do you have something you wanted to add? Yeah. Okay, great.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
So I'd like to echo what Trustee Wheeler said. I'd like to see something more explicitly about managing our resources for not just this year, but future, all future years as well. It's in a sub-bullet, but I think it might be best in the statement itself. And like Trustee Gutierrez, I also feel a little bit rushed along. But if the superintendent is saying that this is just some general guidance and we're going to get to wordsmithing later, then that's fine. But I don't want this to be the final one.
No,
Thank you.
it won't be. Yeah. All right. So,
So,
management resources.
I want to open it up to community comments. We haven't heard from any members of the community on this item. So now is your turn to provide input on this item if you wish. So raise your hand if you wanted to provide community comment on this item. All right. So I see no hands. So, and I'll remind people that if you want to provide community comment for any item, including the ones coming up, please fill out a comment card and give your card to Ms. Loga. That will help us manage the items. All right, so we will move on to item 9C, school size.
Dr. Clark's trying to kill me. Dr. Clark reminded me that today he rewrote it, that last one. So
So it's different than this, or
it
this
is.
is it? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So this topic actually came up at the end of the last board meeting to talk about discussion of school size. And so I think we want to get some clarification on a couple of things. And then I also want to talk about what this does mean and what this doesn't mean. So I think there's some impact to it. So, all right. So obviously our need is, we've made a commitment that in the future we're going to open a new school. And so there's a conversation, and it has been a conversation for quite some time, about the size of that school as well as our choice schools, and really a conversation about the size of every school, right? And so we want to look at some numbers to sort of figure out what's an acceptable size for elementary school. Because at least with Slater and Stevenson to some degree, and Castro Mistral, right now, all of them, if we're using the DFC recommendation, would be built at 450, right? And I want to preface this by saying that we're not reducing classrooms at any site. We have to do the upgrades in all classrooms. So if there are existing classrooms there, we will be doing those. Those are already been accounted for. But it does impact if we're building a 350 student school at any of those three that I just mentioned, but that's possible. The other question is that we have a task force that's about to start that needs to understand by what number are we trying to get neighborhood schools at, knowing that it's possible that we may not be able to get everyone. And so the second part about this need is that, as we've seen in some of the emails that have came across, that there is limited space available at several neighborhood schools. And in this case, I'll show you in a couple minutes, those schools are now, Landos is at capacity, Huff is at capacity, and Bub is at capacity. And then of course, Stevenson has the largest wait list of all schools at 120, I believe it is. And then our current enrollment decisions were actually influenced by the closing of schools. And so that's a little ways ago. And so part of this is with the opening, one of the recommendations that came out of the BATF last year was to move certain assignment zones to relieve overcrowding at schools, because we have some parents who actually drive past a couple of schools in order to get there. And we do some forced assignments when we hit capacity at a school. So we just need to keep that in sort of contact. And then the last question is at what point is a school population sustainable? And I think that question has also been raised, right? If we're saying that schools have to hit a certain mark, then at what point do we start to say that a school is no longer a viable option because of its population size? And I want to preface that by saying we're not asking to close schools either. What we're simply saying is that we need to be cognizant that as we're thinking about school size, we have to have like a trigger point at some point that says, is this where, when do we have to look at a cost benefit analysis to see, is it possible that we can have we can realize savings by possibly moving some school communities around? So let's look at, on December 10th, we asked board members to sort of weigh in their thoughts about school size. And the reason why this one's important is because currently every school, including Stevenson, will be built to the specification of minimum 450 students. Huff, Bub, Landos actually exceed that current size and have more classrooms. And so those classes are all getting updated. But Stevenson, which is currently at 400 students, actually will have 2 extra classrooms next year if we keep it at 450. And that's not a, we have a little ways to go before we actually make that decision, but it is something I want you to keep in mind in terms of how we're building things. And so when we asked for guidance on the December 10th, one board member said, I like the range. Another one said, I'm comfortable with neighborhood schools being at 450, but I'm also concerned that the choice programs are sort of, will make that sort of unsustainable, but the range is fine. Another board member said that range is there. Another one said that a max of 450, which allows 3 strands. And the last board member said 450 as per the vote on district standards as presented by DFC on 6/11. And that was actually taken just from the tape, so it's not. So I want to talk about, and this part of this information actually came from the BATF and their final recommendation that occurred at the end of last year before I came. And so let's look at attendance at the following schools. So this is their numbers that they reported out. So in 2014-15, attendance at Bub was 499. Its current attendance is 455. Its predicted attendance next year will be 547. And with the opening of 9 schools, Slater, if we balance, you can see that it would be around 435 if you accept the recommendations that they also said in terms of moving populations around. And then you can sort of see how this goes. Castro, which was at 450, part of that is also due to the split of the school, pulling Mistral out. But it was at 450. It's currently projected to be at 283 next year. And the BATF recommendation of a balanced 9-school solution would be 450 students. Huff is at 644. Next year will be at 582. Again, it will be around 516. So you can see how a 9th school sort of impacts it. And then obviously next year's predicted enrollment without Slater sort of has an impact. Obviously the largest school that a Slater school would impact would be the Landos population. It would actually be Landos, Montaloma, and Faircroft would be the 3 schools that would take the biggest hit from the population. And so right now, the implications of this is that every school will be brought up to the minimum standard of 450. That includes choice schools. And then, the other implication that neighborhood school enrollment will never reach 450 students at all sites. Currently, 2 schools are around 300 with its current boundary configuration. And the fact that we have a couple of other factors, right? So we have choice schools, and then we also have Romero. So there's movement within our district that allows for that. It does impact the work and the recommendation of the Student Area Advisory Task Force that will be starting up. So if we choose for schools to be at 450 or to have a range, or if we want them to be smaller, then we should know. And then a perfect math scenario would put around 400 students at every single school, but that's essentially taking all the numbers across the board, dividing it by the current number and then pushing them out. And we all know that that's not really a feasible solution, but a perfect math solution is a part of one of the implications. So I'm going to put this back up, and then what we're looking for is sort of guidance about what you would like for us to do. I will say that currently the Stevenson configuration, even though it's at 400 students currently for next year, will be built when we start construction to 450 students, as well as Mistral will be built to 450, even though it's currently at 400 students. And then Slater, when that school opens up, it will be built or it will be renovated to accommodate 450 students based off of the current recommendation.
Before we start the discussion, let me ask a question. If you build all schools to be 450 and you have fewer students at that school than require 450 student classrooms, what would you do with the empty classrooms?
So it is possible that we could look at possibly doing pre-K at those schools. So that's a possibility. It's possible that we could, even though our TK population actually dropped, it's possible that we could do TK at those schools. We are, in some cases, cramped for space in terms of intervention teachers, resource teachers, after-school programs. And so we could spread those out throughout the district.
Science labs.
Yes, yes. I always get into that. That was actually the next one, but thank you, Bill, for the prompt. It is possible to look at adding science labs to schools that have extra capacity. So it is possible that we can utilize those rooms for other purposes. I'll use Stevenson as a good example. Currently, Stevenson has one additional classroom, unlike other schools, and that classroom is actually used for after-school programming, and it's sort of a tight. So if they don't have any extra space next door because every single space is used at that particular school. So it is possible that we could limit size and build and go. It does have implications on the budgets, but yes, we would find other uses for those rooms. We still have to move the special ed preschool, which is currently located at Slater. And so that would need a home. And those classrooms actually have specific requirements for the rooms. And so we would need to look at that. We were talking about pre-K actually today, and it's possible that we can, I don't know if we signed up for that. We did? We did. Okay. But it is also possible that if we add pre-K, we have to look at what are the appropriate classrooms because they have specific needs in terms of toilet sizes and stuff. So yes, it is possible to use those rooms for a myriad of reasons. Right now, it's not a defined thing.
Let me clarify. You said pre-kindergarten, not transitional kindergarten. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, preschool. All right. So before we get started with the board discussion, I'd like a show of hands of who in the audience wants to make a community comment.
Clarifying questions.
Just a minute. So question or comment, raise your hand if you are going to have a question or comment during this agenda item. Okay, so one. All right, so we're going to do, yeah, two. Okay, so please go back and fill out your cards. We're going to do clarifying questions by the board first, then we'll do community comments. And I'm seeing two members of the community who wish to speak. So you'll each get 3 minutes. And then after clarifying questions by the board and community comments, we will have more substantive discussion by the board. So clarifying questions by the board, who would like to go first? Trustee Nelson. And I'm going to, right now, you know, I'm expecting this is going to be longer than 30 minutes. And right now I'm going to say 2 minutes per trustee for
You set
clarifying questions,
right.
and then probably 2 minutes for substantive comments later. Trustee Nelson.
I'll wait until it starts. Okay. Since this has to do with classrooms and sizes of schools and things like that, I'd like to ask the budget allocation summary that we have seen and agreed on and worked on for the last 6 months. is that set up for 450 schools, 450 student schools?
Yes, so if you.
Okay, so
Yes.
all I want is a yes, no answer. Right, that's all.
But, well, it's
That's
a little
my
bit,
only question.
I don't understand, but it's a little bit more nuanced than just that. It also assumes that at the schools that are larger than 450, that the work is going to be done in those classrooms also. So a site like Huff, which has more classrooms than 450, we took into account that we would have to do work beyond 450 students or classrooms. And
So there either is a yes or a no, because from Mr. Lee, it was these classrooms are going to, this site is going to be built to accommodate 450 students in permanent classrooms. And it didn't include, if we leave the temporary buildings that are there, of course, you can put more students in, right? But so the answer I got was yes. This is for 450 student sized MURs, restrooms, permanent classrooms done. And I know there's lots of nuances. We can put lots of extra buildings and
Correct.
leave buildings that are there, or take them out or do whatever, but that's all.
Okay, so clarifying questions by the board. Trustee Lambert?
So the numbers on that slide, what is the assumption on the attendance of the two choice schools?
So the predicted attendance amount has both of the choice schools at 400. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 students who are floating around. And if you increase the size of, I'm going to use Stevenson. I hate to make them feel picked on right now, but if you use Stevenson as an example, you're going to add 2 additional classrooms. So out of the 120 students that are currently on the wait list, 50 more will get into Stevenson, and will somewhere, some way, 50 students would disappear from those schools across the board.
Thank you.
Trustee Gutierrez, you have a clarifying question?
No,
Okay, so I have a clarifying question. I'm looking at the line for Castro with a current attendance of 2015-16, no, predicted attendance of 2016-17 of 283, but a planned school size of 400, schools of 450. So I think from your previous clarifying response that there'll be 283 students at Castro in a school built for 450. So you'll have extra rooms for extra work, plus potentially extra rooms for pre-kindergarten.
Pre-kindergarten, science labs, there are other needs at RSP classrooms. But yes, Castro Mistral will be a 900 student facility. And this currently has about 600. If we assume that next year's numbers, predicted numbers, actually translate into 2 years from now, it would be 683 students on a 900 student campus.
Thank you. And I'll note that our board in the past has expressed interest in preschool, and that, it's at 1 minute here, and that the Castro neighborhood is the one in most need of preschool. All right, so
Trustee Coladonado had
Trustee Coladonado.
So on the, I assume that the school size spreadsheet is up on the projector, correct?
Yes.
So the first line, attendance 2014-15, has Castro at 450. I'd like to, this is my first question. I don't understand how that can be 450, because it would either need to be 600 and something when Castro neighborhood and Strong were combined, something like 670, or it would need to be more like 300, because that's what the neighborhood size, that was the size of the neighborhood program in 2014-15. So I think that the 450 in that cell is not correct. But my second question is, we have current attendance at Castro, and if they're talking the 300s, could staff elucidate how many classrooms we're using for the 300 students at Castro currently, and the 372 students at Fairclough. I'm assuming that that each of these schools are 3 streams, even at 301 and at 372 students. Is that assumption correct?
Okay, so let me, Ms. Lampert is here also. She said that number is actually off by 100, so it should have been around 350. That first line was actually pulled from the BATF's chart that they had at the end of the year. The next lines the next two come from the actual district. So those are numbers that I pulled. So she's saying it's 350, so we're off by 100 students. The answer to your second question is no, those are not 3-strand schools. When enrollment drops at a particular school, so does the strand. And at our higher schools, it actually increases. So a school like Huff in some grade levels will be around 4 to 5 teachers as opposed to 3.
I think maybe what's happened is the ATF, and it was confusing at a number of times during the process, which charts we looked at. Because our boundary zones in the district share the names of the schools, I believe that first line you have for 2014 to 15 are the number of students that live within the zones.
Okay.
Above, the zones
Okay.
above. And perhaps in the bottom portion of the chart, you use actual attendance.
Thanks for clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
But
so,
That changes a lot.
Yeah.
We don't have
Um,
kindergarten.
excuse me.
up there?
What?
Superintendent Rudolph, are you saying that we don't actually have 3 kindergartens or 3 first grades at Fairclough now?
It is 2, depending on the size. So for instance, at Therakoff next year, I believe they are dropping to 2, to 3, 1 TK, 3 Ks. And then Castro is actually dropping down to 2. It's been 2. So they're staying at 2. So we don't have 3 at every single site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got 2 members of the public who have questions or comments, and Hafsa, I have you as second, but you still have a question or a comment? That was it? All right. So, Mr. Bell?
Should I make this quick? I'm Steve Bell. My son goes to Landos. And what else do we need? Information?
That's it?
That's good. Okay, cool. So, yeah, very quickly, I just want to encourage the board to think long-term with this. It might be tempting to look at the number of kids we have right now and the school capacity and think, oh, no, we can just fit everybody in the schools we have right now. But when you buy a hard drive, you don't want the amount of data you have right now. You want to be thinking of what you're going to need in the future. And so that might be a bit of a stretch to compare the schools to hard drives, but we don't want to run the schools at 100% capacity, right? Like we want to have space to grow. And I know Dr. Rudolph rides his bike around. He probably sees a lot of construction happening. If you feel like Mountain View is going to grow and we're going to get more kids, we want to have adequate space for that. So please keep that in mind. Also, I wanted to point out that although the schools south of El Camino are at 600 kids now, and so we would have to think about shrinking that to hit 450. I do want to just point out that the number of students that live in that area is about 900. And so with 2 schools, that might work out better than it might seem at first blush. So I just wanted those 2 things to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to close public comment and go on to substantive comments by the board. I think we started with Stephen. Mr. Coladonado, do you want to go?
Sure.
3 minutes.
When
For
did we
me,
start
rather
with
than
me?
focusing on the number of students at each school, I think it's.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Each of our neighborhood schools to,
Yeah,
for us to strive to have a 3-strand program.
Miss Trustee Coladonado, can you talk a little louder
And slower.
and slower? That's right.
You know what? Let me write my comments and I'll email them to Kathy Loga. She can
Read them?
That might be easier to understand.
Okay.
Um,
So Ms.
Ellen?
Logo, did you hear that? He's going to email you. What
we
was your
started
question?
we started with questions from me, not comments from me.
That's right. So now we're moving on and I'm doing comments down the line. So my comment Greg's comment was first, my comment is second, and we'll go back and then we'll come back to you. All right, so 3-minute comments.
Are we having the timer?
Yes, Ms. Nilga, can you set up the timer? Okay, thank you. So having the perspective of time after going through these discussions, many months ago, it helps me understand that a lot of our discussions were based on whether or not to open the school. And now that we know that we are going to open the school, then we base our decisions and further work on, how are we going to help that work? So I think some people are here because they're worried that we're really not going to open up a school. And I would like to assure everybody here that everything I've heard since we had that vote is we are proceeding with opening a school. The time frame has not been discussed. Construction has not been discussed. What that school would look like has not been discussed, but there will be a school there. And I think pretty soon. So I'm looking at, just on this last page, page 6, with Slater at 317, from the previous work of the committee. I have no comment about that other than to say that that seems like a reasonable size to me. And when we say built at 450, that's what I wanted to hear, that building a school at 450 is not the same as populating a school at 450. And it's not the same as whether or not we have the ability to use empty rooms for something else. So I'm interested in preschool, I'm interested in TK, we're interested in special ed, and we are interested in a school at Slater. I am interested in keeping all of our schools. So I was heartened to hear you say, Dr. Rudolph, that we don't want to open the school to close the school. So I'm looking at some of these smaller sized schools, and I think you have just told us tonight that you expect to keep all of our schools open. I think it's interesting to hear that the tentative expectation for Stevenson and Mistral is to have 400 students, but their schools will be built at 450. So, that clearing up that confusion, I think, is very helpful. So is that 3 minutes for me? All right, so I'll go on to Trustee Lambert.
It's my opinion that if we are committed to having neighborhood schools in our district, viable ones, that we should be targeting 450 kids per school. And the reason for that conclusion and the reason for that number comes about from my participation in the 2 task force last spring. And in particular, 2 arguments really stood out to me. One was from the teachers who said that for a public school, having 3 tracks in each grade level provided the educational flexibility that they needed to adequately educate the students. Secondly, I also sort of witness the anxiety of parents when they would hear that it was potential that their school would be down around 300 students. You think about it when think about enrolling your child into a kindergarten program in an elementary school. You want some stability, not only for yourself, but especially for your children. And when you're talking about 300 students, you lose maybe 50 students for some reason, the school really no longer becomes viable. And it isn't robust enough to sort of to withstand changes. You're never going to be perfectly 450, maybe plus or minus 10%. But if you drop too small, it doesn't work, and it's not really the kind of environment. the parents are looking for. Plus, we all live in California and in Silicon Valley, and economies changed, and we've closed schools in the past. God forbid we'll have to get to that stage again, but people remember those kind of things. So as a parent, especially here, we're talking about Therakoff and Landals and Slater. You want those schools to be around 450 kids, for educational opportunities, for the for the security, I think of the kids and the parents. And my view is this is a long-term plan. These numbers are going to change and fluctuate over time, but you always want to adjust the intra-district policies so that you're trying to target this 450. And how we get there, there's a number of ways we can do it, but I think we have to do it if we want to have strong neighborhood programs. Otherwise, we're undermining certain communities right from the start. I'll just add, we talk about opening Slater. We seem very committed to it. Opening a school at Slater to 317 kids is not committed to a neighborhood school in the Slater area.
Okay, so how do you follow up on that? Well, you have to keep going with the logic. And in this case, I see the 317 for Slater, but I look at that more now as an opportunity. And just like with the Castro side or others, you build up to 450 because that's the ideal goal, because you can do that now. And then if space is there to be used, the potential is there for taking care of future enrollments within that neighborhood. Depending on what happens with the redistricting, perhaps that's going to be an issue that's going to affect the populations across the board. But you also have to think about how that fits into a strategic plan. And with having that space, then these other options that we're talking about with STEM or STEAM, those are viable even more at the elementary level because of that space. You can use it for labs, for science labs. You can use math. You can have a mathematics lab. There's so many things that you can tap into those areas for, that it goes hand in hand with that long-term vision that we want to see every single student succeed in our community, and to have that positive environment for faculty and staff and the families at large within the district to come together within their own neighborhoods to see that growth in a positive environment. I think that's key. So being able to have this clarification point come into play about the 450 helps out a lot. And also understanding what the first role really meant in terms of the amount of students available within that community, because that puts into perspective the attendance that might happen next year. And then how that could also change if we were to redistrict in general.
Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, one of the questions I have is the overreaching question is, what's the right direction at this time? Does the board majority choose to review the size of the unbuilt 2 schools at Castro yet again? Or more generally, does the board majority choose to delay our decisions of 2015 and possibly reverse course? I hope not. I hope the answer actually to both of those are not.
The answer to both of those is what?
I hope the answer to both of those is no from our board. We don't want to go back. We don't want to reduce things. Because I think it gets into micromanaging, which we don't want to do. We've given a broad stroke of what we want. It was 250. The thing is does that, I don't think anywhere it was stated, and the superintendent never got back to me, of where did the facilities committee and group say it was a minimum of 450? Because what I heard from Mr. Lee was 18 classroom schools. It didn't say 18 to 24 classroom schools. It was very clear. If the superintendent is not clear about that, I think he needs to go talk to Mr. Lee and spend a day talking with him and with several members of the district facilities committee. That's what this 450 plus or minus 10% that I think Bill Lampert is talking about. So I think we really have to do that. I think there's some issues that people have wrote about. It will be clear what the sizes are. We're not going to go to a 900 student school. We're not going to go to a 1,200 student school. We're going to keep these smaller neighborhood schools. And the idea that Stevenson even has to start with 317. Doesn't match, Huff started at 250. There is no need to say the school has to start at 400 or 317. So that this issue of starting at the size, look at the evolution of Huff. And you can say you can't have a successful school start at 250. In 2010, there was a school standard that was going to be 350 students per school. That was not accepted, but that was written up that that's what the thought was of what the school sizes would be. So 450, the size of 450, the 18 classroom schools, and all the stuff to run that permanently. And then we adjust the boundaries around. There was an interesting statement that was made by a trustee that was running in 2004. That was my time doing. And it was that we can address the elephant in the room. I'll talk that later.
Finish your sentence, please.
Which is race and segregation. That now we can address, in 2004, Gloria Higgins said we can now address that.
Thank you. So I'm gonna, yes.
Trustee
Superin-
Columnados.
Yeah, okay, so
I believe we should target neighborhood schools at 3 streams each, which results in a student population in the vicinity of 450 students per neighborhood school. Like Trustee Lampert pointed out, we heard from teachers that having 3-strand programs at our neighborhood schools is a desirable goal since it facilitates better collaboration between teachers and better differentiation of instruction for students.
okay, so I'm gonna move around, give every trustee another chance to talk, and we'll do 2 minutes this time. And since I started, Trustee Lambert, you can talk. Start.
Yeah, so I think the only other comment I have is that I realize sort of this is a process. And as long as we have a goal of targeting 450 kids per neighborhood school and a path and a mechanism to get there, you know, I'm satisfied with starting at smaller schools, but I want a clear path and a fairly rapid path to get to, you know, get to the right size and a commitment from the district and the board.
Trustee Gutierrez.
That makes perfect sense. And so that goes into the long range planning that we're discussing as a whole during this conversation of the numbers. The second step would then be, well, what does this look like? What's the timeline for this? How are we going to pay for this? Because the numbers, I think we all agree that 450 makes sense. The strands issue is very important for all schools in general, whether they're choice or not. You want to be effective in that area as best as you can. And so you address these issues head on now as we are, knowing that we've already made decisions in the past that we're holding on to, regardless of the situation. But the potential to develop something better and more positive is there. And now I'm just waiting to see, well, what are the next steps? When will we get those? And let's see what happens.
Trustee Nelson.
Yeah, you need to time me, right? Yeah, I agree with Trustee Lambert, is that a similar goal where the schools are similar size, though they may be used in different ways, as Ellen has talked about. So if we find Mistral doesn't get up to the total classroom number that it needs, then there's extra classrooms to do other kind of stuff with. And, you know, the spare portables that we have that are in good condition, boy, I can tell you at Bub, we loved it when one of those portables was dedicated to a science lab. You could set up there and bring the 5th graders in day after day. It really makes a difference. When we had one more portable that was available for Destination Imagination, a project-based learning, in that case after school or Saturdays program, it was really useful. But that's sort of different than this 18 classroom permanent facility schools that can handle 3 strands. And if for a while we're running a number of the schools at 400, that's fine. I'll wait until the superintendent is willing to listen to me. That's rude, Rudy. Could I start with my 3 minutes again?
Not 3 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Or maybe you're just not paying
So,
attention.
so if we're going to talk about civility,
Yeah, okay. You can think of I'm just talking to my board members.
I'm
You
not.
don't
We're
have
running
to
numbers
listen.
for you because you're mentioning numbers. So we're actually computing them, but next time we won't.
Okay, thank you. So I think, the numbers that we have on this, we spent a lot of community sweat and tears on getting to this 450 baseline. I think it's a workable baseline. And as we go into a next bond for the district office and stuff, we can think about adding more buildings in
So,
certain places.
I appreciate a comment that trustee Gutierrez made, and I think Mr. Bell, that while we are building and while we have bond money, this is the time to build. So building at 450 and with flexibility about usage of those rooms, I think is a wise thing to do. And I also, along with that, so just like some schools will have fewer students than 450, some schools will have more students than 450. So neighborhood students who live, within blocks of Huff or Bub should be able to go to Huff or Bub. So, the main thing that I'm interested in is flexibility and not being just so stuck in a box about the way things have to be, that I like the idea of us, being able to work for the future. Yes?
Could you clarify that? So what range of flexibility are
So,
you willing to accept?
For example, I'm looking, and this is not written in stone. For example, I'm looking at the chart on page 6, and it has the Budget Advisory Task Force recommendation on the bottom line of 333 compared to the predicted attendance of Torikoff of 2016-17 of 358. I think Torikoff is a vibrant, excellent school and can thrive with 2 or 2.5 kindergartens. And I think it's fine with that. And then we can build it at 450. We can make an MUR that allows all the students in the school to come in. But I don't think, so those are neighborhood children who attend Torikoff. I think this is a thriving area of the city where more and more people are buying because it's more affordable. So I think Torikoff is fine at 358 or 333.
Okay, so you're willing to accept a deviation of 450. So basically one
Of
plus or
students.
minus 100 or 150 on either side.
Yeah.
I have a clarifying question for Dr. Rudo. You mentioned this earlier about the Romero Act. How does the Romero Act affect our ability to keep 450 students at Therakoff?
Currently, they can request out as long as we have space. So Therakoff's enrollment is reflective of that. So even though there are, at least in 2014, there were 379 students within that zone. Therakoff is one of the schools where we see a lot of requests to go to other schools.
So there will always be this pressure of sort of moving out of the Therakoff area because of the Romero
It
Act.
is. It is real.
Until
Therakoff is
we achieve all the goals we were looking for.
Yeah, there are more requests coming out of Therakoff than any other school.
It's going to be difficult to get to maintain a.
Yeah, and currently with building every school at 450, you will be 438 students above our current enrollment, which is also our predicted enrollment 10 years from now.
Thank you.
But as Trustee Nelson said, and you described in the beginning, there's a lot of enrichment and good education that can happen outside of a traditional classroom in those extra classrooms.
Correct. But just so we're clear, every school, including the choice schools, will all be built to 450 minimum.
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 Okay, thank you. And before we end
I had-
hold on a second.
Okay.
Before we end this discussion topic, I would like to repeat what I said earlier so that and make sure that it's heard. Our board in the past has said we support preschool, and a lot of us are very interested in preschool. I think it would be terrific in the service to the students in our school district if we provide for more preschool in our buildings. Trustee
Yeah.
Nelson.
I would agree with that, but remember, you keep on using this 450 student minimum. If what you're talking about is what we have here, which is a 450 student, 18 classroom schools, I think that's what the direction you're getting. If I don't think you've been given the direction of 600 student schools.
No, but I can.
Or 800 student
I
schools.
can tell you that
Or
the
900 student schools.
The current estimate for Therakoff and Stevenson is coming in around 30 million, which is higher than what we allocated. So
Right.
there will have to be some difficult decisions down the road.
I mean, my point, which I got voted down on at Mistral and Castro, is maybe there's one building that is planned for but not built right now. So I don't know whether that applies to this area, but we spend a lot in the middle schools, and that's where we are. And the issue of size versus, you mean that the school board is facing difficult decisions. That's how the Voice put it. So we're willing to face difficult decisions. And as Gloria also wrote when she was interviewed in her 2004, maybe part of it is we need to look at how we're setting up enrollments. She was saying we should be trying to set enrollments in the schools to more reflect what the district is. And we have compartmentalized our school boundaries in most cases to increase segregation. And maybe there's a way, as part of doing this boundary adjustment, we can adjust that. The issue is if your kid gets enrolled in Huff and you're a renter, all the rest of your kids, because they're siblings, even if you buy a house in Mauna Loma, will be enabled to go to Huff for the rest of your time your family lives in this district. There's some issues like that we will need to work on, I think, of why some of these schools have high enrollments and keep on going higher than expected by the population. One of the demographic reports is there's only 900 and something students that live south of El Camino Real. That's 2 400 student schools, even if you don't take the area that's really close to Castro. You take the area that's really close to Castro and assign it to Castro, it gets less than 960 students. So there are plenty of things we can do with our enrollment policies and our enrollment boundaries that didn't come up earlier.
All right, so I would like to close out this item unless Superintendent Rudolph or Dr. Clark, you have something
Yeah,
else you
so
want to
a
add?
couple quick things, just so all choice schools will be built. I mean, Mistral's already, that one's moving, so I'm saying both choice schools. So Stevenson will be built to 450 per direction. The Students Area Advisory Task Force will look to try and balance neighborhood schools at 450, which means that they will move enrollment or boundary areas around to try to hit that target, knowing that it may or may not be possible to get to that exact number.
Can I add, I think we're also talking, this is where the flexibility comes in. I think we're also talking about maintaining neighborhoods. So not just moving kids around to try to get to 450. I think we also want to maintain neighborhoods.
Yes,
And-
so,
Sorry.
yeah, so for instance, there are areas within BUB, I'm just using the BATF's recommendation. There are areas within BUB and Huff that could possibly be moved to Slater, Landals, or some other site based off of the drawing of a boundary to another school because it's in the neighborhood. So they will move those types of boundaries around to fill a neighborhood school. That's the direction that I'm going to give that task force.
I think that's a good direction, but remember, this board didn't accept any of the recommendations or any of the options that were given to us by
Yeah,
the
or-
Boundary Adjustment Task Force.
I'm
So-
aware of that, but
You,
you
when you
in
put those up,
planning in planning for an additional school, I want to be able to tell them that what they are charged with doing is to look at trying to populate every school, neighborhood schools, at possibly around 450, knowing that even with the BATF's recommendation, a school like Huff, even after you move people, will not be at 450, it will be at 516. But we will build every single school to 450, regardless of its initial capacity. So in the instance of Slater, it will be a 450 school that we were planned for,
wait,
but
why-
we will, it's possible that the enrollment will be lower than that.
Slater's off
higher.
the books right now, right? It's not on this.
I'm talking about the work of the students attendance area task force. That's one of the things that will come out of a target of 450.
I don't, are we saying that Slater has to start off as
I
450?
think my understanding, it's Slater will be built to 450, but it will not be populated at 450.
Correct. There will be excess space, just like there currently when Castro is finished. If its population stayed the same, there will be extra space at Castro, even though it is 283 students, there would be capacity for 450 students. The same thing will happen at Slater and Stevenson. Even though its current capacity is 400, it will be built to a capacity of 450 students. So that's what I'm saying. Capacity, I'm not talking about capacity in terms of what's currently going to be in there. I'm simply talking about we will build 450, and then we will try to fill neighborhood schools to 450, knowing that there is a range.
Yeah, and some schools will be more than 450. Yes.
And we're not losing out on that option.
Yeah.
That's, I think that's the point of
Overbuild.
confusion,
Right.
Superintendent, that I think has to be clarified. The ones that are as they are, we still upkeep. They still remain intact. We're not destroying, we're not removing buildings. We're not
No.
taking down
We're not
extra
going to,
space.
yeah, we're not going to destroy any existing sites. So for instance, Theracol, which has, it's actually bigger than its current capacity of 450, has an additional portable or modular unit behind it, right? Even though it's at 358 and they're not using that, we're not going to take that away. But right, so that will exist. There will be, we're building beyond what our current capacity is a better way of putting it.
But just to clarify for the board, Huff, Bub, and Landals presented a unique situation that they have the bank of portables at the back of the campus where the planned multi-purpose room is going to go.
Yeah.
All those portables are removed and basically tossed because of the state that they're in. And some actually get relocated to other schools based on need. But they will have a reduction in the number of classrooms they have on campus. Right now, those 3 schools have 11 classrooms over the 18 classrooms at each site, 4, 4, and 3. So what I hear you say is, because we're right in the middle of Huff, Bub, and Landals, we met with the architects today, and the next steps for their modernization. We are essentially to build those schools for 450 kids, which is 18 regular classrooms. So if they exceed that, we keep those rooms, or do we remove those rooms?
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
question.
and
That's the,
Yeah, and
Because
I'm,
it's
so,
simple math. Thank
so
you for that
I know
question.
Bub and Huff and to a lesser extent Landals, they're filled with neighborhood students. Now, I understand the wagon wheel area of Huff that's going to become Slater. I understand that component, but there are lots of kids around Huff, you know, who live in houses and apartments, who, you know, those families want to be able to go to Huff. Same thing for Bub. I don't know if you're talking about the area by, that's by Castro that goes to Bub, but what I hope comes out of all this is that these schools that have neighborhood students in them, they walk to school, they ride their bikes to school, they don't get driven to school, that those students are still going to be accommodated at their neighborhood schools. So if you have to take the portables out in order to make an MUR, that's one thing. It makes sense to me. But I think we need to continue to look at enrollment to see if we need, you know, new modulars somewhere on those campuses.
So to continue on with Huff, since it
Yeah.
used as an example, Huff's projection for an enrollment next year, based on the numbers that I have as of today, because this was printed a week ago, is 584.
Mhm.
So that's 134 students over the 450. It translates into 6 classrooms.
Right.
So do we build Huff an additional 6 classrooms on top of the 18 to get them to be 24 classrooms?
So
to
Huff,
maintain those
yeah, Huff is a
neighborhoods.
really good example
Right.
because
Do we
Huff
have
is
any
the,
other
hold-
input
excuse me.
than you, Ellen?
Yes, Huff is an excellent example because the Huff wagon wheel area is the one where parents are driving in, and that areas are, those kids are going to be going to the new Slater. So minus those students, how many neighborhood, they walk and ride their bikes to Huff, how many kids are left? So I don't know the answer to that, but I wouldn't want to say that, you know, you live 3 blocks from Huff, but in order to make 450 at another school, you get assigned to a different school. That's what I'm saying. I think we have to have flexibility regarding providing space on campuses for real students who want to go there, who live in the neighborhood, and then having facilities on other campuses that provide for growth and provide for extra classrooms. Now, I'm not an architect. I don't know what that looks like, but I do know that Bub and Huff parents who live a couple blocks away from the school would be very upset if they heard that their child was not going to be able to go to their neighborhood school.
Um,
I'm
Do you
going to
want
call,
next, Dr. Lambert?
excuse me. I'm going to call on Trustee Lambert and then I'll call on you.
so I'd like to follow up with one of the things you said and remind everybody that we had 2 demographic surveys that told us that the population in our school district was not going to grow significantly. And it certainly was not going to grow significantly to be able to populate 9 schools with 450 kids. We just can't do it. Okay. Something is going to have to give. And this is one of the hard decisions that I brought up when we made the decision as a board to open Slater. That fine, we'll open Slater, put her up to 450 kids, but those kids have to come from somewhere. And building, it doesn't make sense to me that some of these kids, I believe, are going to have to come from the choice programs. And building choice programs up to 450 students each, I think is not a wise use of our district's money. If we are going to go ahead and support, as I believe we should be doing, neighborhood schools. We have to think how we just don't have enough kids for 9 450 kids schools. And we don't have the resources to do it.
So Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, part of the issue is putting in temporary buildings at Slater to start it off. The Slater community has come over and said, that's a fine start. Do it as rentals. don't even necessarily buy the portable buildings. It isn't the way Huff started, but Huff started as 250 students. So this idea that you have to magically start with a 450 students permanent school or you can't do anything seems to me very narrow-minded thinking. I wish you guys wouldn't get into that idea silo that everything has to be 450, everything has to be permanent, everything has to be now, and then you say, well, we're $10 million short. It doesn't make any sense, guys. I'm disappointed in you.
So I have one more
I'm
comment,
not
but do you
finished
have?
either,
Okay.
Ellen.
So are you
So
timing
this
Ms.
issue
Loga?
of somehow we've agreed on 18 permanent classrooms and the facilities to match that as the default neighborhood elementary school. Neighborhood elementary school is what I thought we did. And I sort of agree with Dr. Lampert is I didn't think we were necessarily saying the choice schools would be that, but piece by piece, we made those piecemeal decisions. The Mistral has to be 450. Now, the superintendent is saying, well, you're saying that Stevenson has to be 450. The numbers don't make any sense, guys, when you say that. It doesn't make any sense. We can't even do simple multiplication and arithmetic and addition. We're sort of a joke if that's the way we're trying to do things. So please don't make this whole process into a joke, because that's what I feel is happening.
Trustee Gutierrez.
Right, so when the committee starts analyzing the data, they'll be able to help us also look at the issues in terms of the neighborhood and the numbers. And then when we look at the example that was brought up with Huff, that's part of the process of trying to problem solve the neighborhood itself, what the school's gonna look like, and the larger questions in general. For example, the military students, kids of the military. I mean, they live closer to other schools than where they go. But no one wants to talk about that.
Correct.
Well, we need to, right? Just like we talk about choice schools or neighborhood schools, they're also part of our community.
Correct.
What's in their best interest and for the parents' best interests. So I'm looking forward to having these media discussions as we go through this process, hand in hand with the committee and with the district. But as Trustee Nelson had mentioned as well, the more we go through this process, the better we have to be with presentation of specifics, what it looks like. I'm glad we had a clarification here from a member of our committee who said the first row is X, not Y, right? Because when you look at this, you're thinking, where did these numbers come from? But when you find out that the background is, this is the number of students that's close to that school, it changes the perspective of how you look at the numbers in general. Does that make sense?
So I have one more comment, and I'm hoping we can wrap this up pretty soon. I think what I heard tonight is that the choice programs, Mistral and Stevenson, are going to be populated at 400, and they're going to be built at 450. And what the benefit we'll get from a 450 building school is extra classrooms for those school sites to use for extra things like a science lab, like some other thing. I don't know if it's worthwhile talking about building those schools at 400, but I think it's a good idea to have extra classrooms, and it gives us flexibility. So
just to be clear, you're also saying to build at its current capacity right now at the schools that are larger than 450. So you're directing us to build Huff to 582.
No, we aren't. Where did you ever hear anybody say that?
Because
that is not what three of us have been giving you direction.
In order to build the MUR, we have to take out portables to where it's going to sit.
Then move the portables. Put them to a different place. Put new portables.
So then we will have to
put
add
rental portables. There are all sorts of things that you guys are saying we can't even think of those options. Think broader, think wider, think more options.
I'm just
I
clarifying.
am really
If you would let me
disappointed in you
finish,
guys.
if you would let me finish, I am saying that the direction that I'm hearing is that we will then turn around and replace those portables at every single site that is over 450. And that a school like Stevenson will be
No,
built.
because otherwise, what you're saying is we don't need to change any of the boundaries. We are not going to pay attention to changing boundaries. We're just going to ignore the idea that we're going to change boundaries. I have no idea where you're coming from, Dr. Rudolph.
Okay, so listen,
I really don't.
one more
have any
time,
idea where-
listen to me. Currently, Huff is at 582. To get a new MUR, we must destroy a series of portable units in order to place a new MUR there. Since we were planning on 450, what you're currently directing the staff to do is to turn back around and to place new modulars, because we're not using portables, new modulars on that site to accommodate 582 students.
No, because the point is, if you are opening Slater School and doing rental portables at the Slater site, and you've rearranged the boundaries. So for instance, it's still neighborhood schools. If you're way over on the other side of the community and you used to live in the Huff neighborhood, we now guarantee that you can still go to the Huff school.
But our
Rudolph,
current
you need to open your
reality,
mind more.
our current reality is that we don't have Slater there and we don't have the capacity to put students over there. So I am asking again, because I think
How much time are you talking about? It's going to take 2 years to do this. We can give the city 1 year to vacate the field at Slater. We can put those in 3 months.
so for Huff, Bub, and Landals, we're going to put new portables there to replace the ones that we will destroy for the MUR.
If we haven't opened Slater and if we haven't changed any of the boundaries and we've done nothing compared to where we are today, you need to think in the future, and you're thinking stuck today. That's
We're
what
gonna-
Mr. Gutierrez was talking about.
We're going
We're
to
going to be working on this as a community to figure out how the boundaries are going to move. It may mean instead of people coming from this side of El Camino and going to that side, we may take some of them and say, we're going to reverse the flow in some cases.
okay. I
So
get.
you need to open up your mind.
I,
We
I-
are not stuck on our current.
I am
boundaries.
talking about the current process. We do not assume that we do not have Slater. That is what
Why?
I'm saying,
Why?
because Slater isn't there right now.
You can be there in a year and a half.
Even in a year and a half, we'll be almost done with Huff, Bub, and Landos, unless you would like me to stop construction at those sites.
No, we told you we didn't want you to stop.
So we can't do both because we don't have the finances to do both.
How much
So-
how much rental income do you have? You
The
have
rental in-
almost $1 million a year coming in to dedicated to reopening Slater. How much does it cost to rent buildings to put in Slater and to build 6 classrooms to do a startup school? You're not paying any attention to what this community has said, Dr. Rudolph.
So where will we put the preschool?
The preschool.
Yeah,
The
where will we
special
put the
ed
preschool
preschool?
that's currently at Slater?
Do
And
you
the
know how big
county
that
and the
field is? You
preschool.
put the temporary buildings where the preschool isn't.
Okay,
There
so,
are 3 baseball fields that are where the preschool isn't.
okay. So I just want to make sure that the direction that we're moving forward in so that we're clear. Currently, we do not have Slater. We can look at all the options to try and open Slater, but our current reality is that our BAS looks at the current schools that we have. So what we're saying is that at the schools that are over the target amount of 450, regardless of where they currently are, we will build to its current capacity in some type of fashion, knowing that the cheapest fashion we use is a modular unit. And
If we-
we will put those
Excuses
there
for time.
because we cannot destroy next year 8 classrooms or 6 classrooms and not replace them because we don't have a place for those students to go. So our budget allocation sheet will need to account for the 582 students who are going to be at Huff or the 573 students who are going to be at Landals or the 547 students who are going to be at Bub. That's what I'm trying to make clear, that that's what we have to do.
And that's what I think Trustee Nelson is talking about, a temporary solution. So temporary buildings.
And the point is, if you're going to have temporary buildings, why not you need to give the city 1 year, that's 365 days, to say, we are going to take over the complete fields at Slater.
Well, I don't want to take over the complete fields at Slater. I
To
want
start,
it.
we might need them temporarily for a few years.
So I
But it's our property, and if we have a need for temporary buildings, this idea that, anyway.
Dr. Clark, you wanted to say
I was
something?
just thinking that when the conversation that Todd Lee and I had today with the architect for Huff, Bub, and Landals, where some of the portables that are at the back where the multipurpose room is going to be, we have to house the current students somewhere while the multipurpose room is being built. So most of those portables are actually being moved out onto the blacktop and the strip of grass that's right next to the blacktop. They'll be housed there for the year of construction of the multipurpose room. Then they actually need to stay there for a little bit until the library's done, et cetera. But that's temporary housing. What we could do is essentially place the best of those portables in the spot where they could stay the longest. And while we're working on the boundaries and adjusting Slater opening, et cetera, slowly over time, those portables start to come away, peeled off. And so Huff right now is almost 600. In a year from now, it might be 550. It might be 5. And then so a portable comes away, and slowly over time, it gets to where that campus is at 18 classrooms. Is that what I hear the board saying?
That's what I'm saying, but I don't know what the rest of the board
Generally,
says.
it would surprise me if Huff is ever at 450, using a neighborhood model. But in your general description is what I envision.
Yes.
Right, working hand in hand with the task force to try and figure out the puzzle. That's the direction that I'm hearing from everyone.
Well, my part is not so much the task force. It's about I have to go to the architects and tell them which buildings to tear down.
Yeah.
And so if we relocate those buildings, knowing that some of them might stay longer past the actual construction period while the task force is working on boundaries, that's what I can tell them.
That's good to know. Yes.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank
consensus?
you, and I'm sorry being rough on you guys, but this is,
No, you're
this
not
is
being,
difficult.
you're not being rough, you're being rude. You're being downright uncivil.
It's these
No,
kinds
this
of
isn't brutal. This
decisions
is
are
just-
brutal decisions.
It is
No,
not.
I back up Dr. Rudolph. Basically, your aggressive and assertive attitude really prevented intelligent discussion here.
So I'd like to move on at 9:35 to California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System Annual Report.
So I am in here presenting as a substitute. Assistant Superintendent Karen Robinson is unable to be here tonight. So I am just kind of filling in. The report was attached to the board agenda.
Mhm.
Thanks. So the CalPAD system basically was created in California years ago. It's just a way that we track not student achievement, but basically the demographics of the students. So inside the report that's there, that was attached, the presentation, it's not so much a presentation, it's just a report, a list of a lot of charts. It focuses on student past trends over the last 3 years of enrollment, our English learner population, programs such as special ed, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, ethnicity, also teacher staffing, the number of staff members we have in the district. And a big focus is the teacher compliance, which happens to be on that screen eventually, the very last page. And Karen asked me to point out that there's something we were very proud of in the district, that this is our first year in a while that we've had 100% compliance with all of our teachers' credentials. So it's just for information for the board.
I have a quick question. So when I look at that chart at the end, there's like these little circles with a little line through them. Do you know what that means?
I think that might be somebody's notes.
Oh, okay. But there's nothing special. It's just
No.
Okay, gotcha.
Is this, I thought, is this a system that you use to track, that you actually can track student performance, or is this
No,
just?
this
the
is just
enrollment?
demographics,
Okay.
enrollment, attendance, classifications, programs.
You did say that. I didn't.
Yeah.
Do you remember
So
what
he
the name of
didn't
that
give
other
a
one is?
presentation?
Yeah, he did. Just one page.
CalPAC?
I'm back. Anybody? I have no clarifying questions.
Member of the public?
Any member of the public have clarifying questions on this item? And this is a discussion item. It's not an action item. Any substantive comments by the board? Other than thank you to Ms. Robinson for preparing the material. Thank you. Well, that was refreshingly quick. All right. Board updates. Trustee Nelson.
Actually, I have something. All right, it'll take me a minute to find it.
Okay, so I will move on. Ms. Lilga, I'm going to send you my report. I'm not giving an oral report tonight.
No comments.
Trustee Lambert, Trustee Gutierrez.
I've already sent my report in.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
And since I sometimes don't remember to send my report in, I've went to 2 Stanford seminars on digital education, and there's 2 of our teachers that are going to that also. So it's sort of interesting. Though it's being done at a very high level, and like some of the people running it don't know what LCFF means. So but we did have somebody from the county. I also went to the architect planning meeting between Therakoff and Stevenson. I'm still worried about the large imbalance with Therakoff on the short end of how many people show up to these meetings. So I don't know what we can do to level that out. I gather that what the superintendent is doing is having invitation to smaller groups to work on these things. I hope that's happening for this, the Therakoff Stevenson prospects. I went to the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, which unfortunately didn't have a quorum, but gave them some information on the Baracus decision. And the most interesting thing was the CSBA's roadshow.
Oh, you went to that?
Yeah, and so they had some very interesting things, what was happening and what wouldn't happen probably, and some things on, I talked to the lawyer from the Education Legal Alliance who works with Jeff Daniels at Berkeley Unified School District about Baracus and the parcel tax issues. And the last thing, which was the funniest thing, was open house at Landell's. All the elementaries had open house yesterday. And it's really interesting. They really are, I went to about a dozen classrooms, and the teachers there are really using the one-to-one laptops all the way down, definitely through 3rd grade, even 2nd grade. So having those, every kid has a laptop. And what was even better, we're past a one-to-one district. We're like a 1.1 to 1. We have excess computers that are working, slotted in those slots. So if there's something wrong with one computer, the kid immediately gets another working one that a Chromebook opens up, 30 seconds it's working. So we're doing a, great job on that one-to-one effort that we've done. And the teachers really appreciate, and they, at least the ones I talked to were really using it on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Item 11, items for future agendas. And I mentioned earlier this evening that at the next agenda, we'll bring the resolution on supporting or not the extension of Prop 30 that Jonathan Farazan submitted to us. We also have the study of Latino student achievement, and paired with that, Trustee Gutierrez shared with us a pretty much an all-day forum that's going to happen at Santa Clara University pretty soon, and a number of us have signed up for that. So Trustee Gutierrez, are you working on whether you still want this agenda item, since some of us are going to the Santa Clara event, or what are your thoughts on that?
Right, because the email I had shared with the team was about, this is basically a half-day session. It starts in the morning, ends at 12:30, and they're discussing the same issues that we were thinking about discussing, but at a much higher level. So it's more beneficial for the team not to hear my opinions or the opinions of other people in general, but rather from the experts themselves at that session, at that event. When you look at the agenda, it's pretty specific in terms of what the needs are. So my suggestion was to go to this event that's close by and not that expensive, to be honest with you, to get that knowledge and feedback of what this really means at a higher level.
So which of us have signed up for this?
I know I have.
I have.
I'm going to sign up. I just have
Okay,
to
so
get
three
through
of
my
us.
credit card.
I know Dr. Rudolph is busy that day. You've got another engagement. Trustee Lambert, are you planning on
Yeah,
going to that?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look. at the
Okay, so we'll
invitation.
see. So
That's okay.
let us know after that if you want to still have this agenda
Right.
item.
Sure.
Okay,
And what I'll try and do, I don't mean to be rude.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What I'll also try and do is see if there's any information that we
Yeah,
can gather
yeah.
that are handouts or what have you, or PowerPoints, to also collect those as much as possible. So that in the end, when I was student trustee at Westside, what we would do is provide to the board a synopsis of
Yeah.
what the event was all about. So I can do a description about the sessions attended, provide any copies of anything that was passed out to the team. And so that way, if you're not able to attend, at least you have some resource information to tap into
okay.
in general.
Okay, any other items for future agendas?
Yeah, I have a one sentence. The technology plan 2014 to 2017. That was supposed to have a yearly update.
Okay, so is that happening? What's going on with that, Trustee Rudolph?
As I explained to Trustee Nelson, it hasn't happened over the last 2 years. And considering that we're about to do a new strategic plan, one of the things that we're going to add is in our regular reports, but no one in the district has been aware that we're actually supposed to report out because it hasn't been done.
So do you think it would be worthwhile to have?
Ellen, I thought the way that it is I give a one sentence and then we discuss it at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, but we
Okay,
can.
because I would like to not have the administration the ability to veto us discussing this.
All right, so Ms. Logo, will you put that on a future agenda at a convenient time? Thank you. Future board meeting dates.
Ellen, I thought
yes?
we were just going to, the way it was done, it's just
You
put
will
on
make
there
yeah,
to discuss a little bit longer next meeting
Exactly.
during this time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have decided to put it on.
okay,
Excuse me.
right. Future board meeting dates, they're listed. Then we have adjournment unless we have anything else tonight. Anybody? All right, going to adjourn at 9:45. Space for Stephen to give his, I think he said, what did you say, 1 minute, 2 minutes?